And I'm Guy. And this is your home for everything Alberta independence. We broadcast live Monday through Friday from 5 p.m. to 7 p.m. Let's get into it.
Yes. Oh, yes. A slow start today because I forgot to write the comments. But here we are. First of all,
I will say it's going to be a pretty big show today. My favorite subject, which is migration to Alberta from other provinces in Canada where people are disenfranchised and hopefully going to migrate to Alberta to vote for independence. Somebody did an interview with quite a few students from a university. So
yes, independent journalist Ali Cantel, something like that. I don't know how to say his name, but first of all, thank you so much for joining us today. Please do subscribe if you haven't. It really does help us out. And we read all your comments, so let us know what you think. We prioritize super chats. Once we see them, we stop everything and read them. Otherwise, after each section, we read all the comments as well.
Yeah, I will say the number one thing that helps us continue our work is just hitting the subscribe button. We don't put anything behind a paywall because we're talking about Alberta independence. We want to make sure every single bit of information gets to the general public.
And when you subscribe, it also helps us kind of spread out more and tells YouTube that you are interested. You can also like the stream or share it. That also helps us out even more, and it is also free.
Okay, let's get into it.
And first of all, hello to Edward that says, yo, Ola. Hola, Edward. Thank you for
Good
being
to see you, Edward.
But let's start with Alberta Stay Free, which is basically just information about the petition and talking about the petition itself to make Alberta independent.
Well, and strategies.
Yes.
Free old Alberta, where the roots run deep and the money trees grow.
And starting with, interestingly enough, Mario Zelaya saying 177 signatures, referendum triggered October 19th. If Alberta separates, I will say, or when Alberta separates, its GDP per capita will rank among the top 5 nations on Earth, higher than Denmark, Germany, the UK, and Canada itself, with a $353 billion economy. 5 million people, no sales tax, with the largest oil reserves in the Western Hemisphere outside of Venezuela.
Well, yeah, and I like Mario, but he is a nationalist, and I couldn't tell after we watched the video if he was for or against Alberta independence. He was definitely helping because he was being honest about the situation, but I don't think he's planning to move to Alberta, and I think it will be he thinks it will be a big detriment to Canada, which it will be, but Alberta,
that's a positive thing.
That's a positive thing for Albertans, and Alberta has been treated like the doormat of Canada for far too long. I hope Mario, even if he does not support Alberta independence, keeps reporting on it honestly as he is, because the financials he put out there, he has a large national audience, and I want them to know that.
Mm-hmm.
Guys, this is massive and breaking news by Juno News. Alberta independence referendum has passed 177,000 signatures. That's how many people have signed on to ask the referendum question. Do you want to separate from Canada? This would be a monumental disaster for Canada if it happened. It would be a massive victory for Alberta if it happened. It would become one of the wealthiest countries on Earth. If people don't already know, the majority of the oil reserves in all of Canada is literally in Alberta. We have the 3rd largest oil reserves in the world. We could literally be building and shipping much more oil to the world, especially given the fact of the events that are happening currently in Iran that are pushing oil to over $100 per barrel. People are now paying nearly 65 cents.
And for nationalists that are conservatives, they have to know if Alberta goes, the big parachute that they could fix Canada with if a conservative gets into power is going to be gone. So it's interesting how he is walking a line. But again, I just appreciate major independent national media reporting honestly on the subject of Alberta independence. Major mainstream media is starting to report on this as well. We're going to get into that in a moment too.
Per liter in taxes from the government when they fill up for gas. In my view, Alberta, if it's separated, I can see a world where their income tax is probably 5 to 10%. There would be no need for any sort of sales taxes. If this does go through and it happens, Canada, this is going to be a huge problem.
Yeah, and these are the kind of people that I think if they're not going to move to Alberta previous to the vote. But if Alberta gets its independence, I fully expect people like him to be looking at Alberta as the option rather than the United States. Young people, on the other hand, are already looking at bailing on Canada, going to the United States. We need to pitch to them to come to Alberta.
But my question is, should they start already supporting Alberta if they do plan to use that as their exit strategy?
Without a shadow of a doubt. I mean, I've talked about this every episode. We need to take the gloves off and tell these national conservatives they need to get behind Alberta independence, because Pierre Poilievre and the Conservatives aren't going to be able to fix Canada, especially come the 12th of this month. Mark Carney is most likely going to secure a majority government. And what, you're going to wait 3 years for a Poilievre pipe dream? Alberta independence is going to happen with less than a year. If it does happen, the vote is going down. We need full support from all national Canada, Americans, as well as the international community. And we need to start reaching out as Alberta independence content creators, not just us, but other people, to these audiences and start interviewing and talking to them. I noticed the Alberta independence community is really quite insulated and is reluctant to step outside of Alberta to interview people.
But I know in the end, as he put it there, it is Ottawa's fault that Canada will fall. It is already falling, but it'll fall down the elevator shaft as soon as Alberta leaves. And everybody that was hating on and saying traitors and not wanting to understand the actual motivations behind it, even past the economic thing, will get a very rude awakening, or they'll continue to live in their bubbles and say, well, now we're failing because Alberta left. It will always be Alberta's fault, unfortunately.
Well, but just how
in their minds.
Just how he kind of pitched it there, and he knew the economics, like he knew the situation and what Alberta actually has, holds, and its value to Canada. I think once Mark Carney gets a majority government, most likely on the 12th of this month, and he has 3 opportunities to do it. Let's not get around. If he doesn't get it on the 12th, and let's say he gets 2 out of 3 Liberal ridings, he can always pay another floor crosser or make a backroom deal. And then his third option is to call a snap election. I mean, surprisingly, I don't know how his poll numbers are holding there, but they are. So he'd probably win a snap election. That being said, I think once he secures a majority government, these national conservatives that know the ins and outs of Alberta politics somewhat will come around and support us. And that's what I'm hoping. And I'm going to start reaching out to them. I know Clyde Do Something lives in British Columbia. He's already supporting Alberta independence, which is good to see. So thank you to Clyde.
Yes, but I also don't want it to be like the Jibby Jab era where everybody was called crazy, insane, and then they reluctantly kind of said, okay, well, you, the crazy ones, the ones in the Freedom Convoy were kind of right, but they will never want to admit it. It's that cognitive dissonance, it's that special Canadian cognitive dissonance that I think will continue to reign.
Yeah, but when I say take off the gloves, I mean take off the gloves. I'm not wanting to play like Pierre Poilievre is on the national stage and lose politely. I want to win, and that means taking the gloves off. That means if they want to call me crazy, lean harder into it. Give them Alberta derangement syndrome.
But we also see that the mainstream media in Canada is also now paying attention, and not just in Canada. I spoke about how a right-leaning news source, independent news source here in Latin America also talked about this, but they don't have the framing 100% right. Here, the National Post says Alberta separatists say they have the 177,732 signatures they need to force independence referendum.
Well, and it sounds more like we're at 250, so we have a little bit of breathing room in case some signatures are false or something went wrong there. That being said, I did want to talk about the 177,000. We chose the date that we did to get this petition off the ground because of the referendum date. We wanted it done by this year, meaning we wanted to hit October 19th. That means we put a mountain of things in front of us. The coldest weather, people were standing outside in blizzard conditions. There are no outside events to kind of piggyback the petition and signatures off of. There was a lot of stuff standing in the way, as well as they're trying to cut the timelines short with the court injunctions from the First Nations. That being said, sometimes God blesses you in very mysterious and strange ways. And there's 7,000 petitioners out there that are really hardened, went out in the hardest conditions. We need to keep these people activated within the movement and having something to do, because they are tried, tested, and true, and they really have walked the walk. And now, we need to make sure they stay engaged with this.
And they're also incredibly valuable, not just for the work they've done up to now, but the canvassers also the work that they can do even after the canvassing is done, as you say, maintain that base kind of activated and maybe talk to each other, have conferences, have talks, have et cetera, et cetera.
Well, a lot of other petitions and things that go through in the States, other countries, even Canada, a lot of these petitioners are actually paid, even though it's through a nonprofit. And that's the thing. None of our people were paid. We had very high standards, 2 pieces of ID. with the 177,000 signatures or the 250, which I think it's at, then I think it's also a blessing because the nationalists aren't going to see us coming at this point. They don't realize what they've actually created, and the grassroots, really hard-souled individuals they've kind of built in this initial movement. And coming into the summertime, it's going to be very interesting. And a lot of people that maybe were scared to sign a petition, I think will check yes when it comes to the actual vote, especially when Carney seems to keep heading in the direction he's heading. We'll talk a little bit later about something the Fringe talked about today, and that was potentially lockdowns due to oil. If Canada even sniffs at that with the amount of oil Alberta has, I think that will set off every single Albertan to vote for independence.
But also Keith Wilson says, quote, Wilson says the focus will be on what we see as the advantages of Alberta independence compared with the very dark path we are on economically and socially with the direction of perpetual Liberal governments in Ottawa.
Yeah, and it's good to see him say this because he's the one that going into this major debate with Jason Kenney, and Jason Kenney is the big oppositional figure. I knew he was going to be early on just because of his background. They can't put somebody from the NDP up. They can't put a national Liberal because it's going to activate and anger everybody in Alberta. Jason Kenney will do the same, but he does it to less of a degree, and he's viewed as a conservative in the eyes of nationalists. And I think a lot of what Carney wants to do is actually win polling amongst nationalists to separate Alberta from national Canada in case he wants to use the Emergencies Act. And we see him bringing that to the Supreme Court as we speak.
But we're also seeing, again, from Carney, and then with the direction that he wants to continue to head for Canada, which is destruction, from Dre Gen Xer saying, quote, absolutely infuriating power grab. The Carney Liberals are already scheming to prorogue Parliament the second they sweep the April 13th by-elections in Scarborough Southwest, University Rosedale, and Terrebonne. From a shaky minority, 170 seats, straight to razor-thin majority, then boom, they shut down the entire House of Commons and every pending bill and debate and revamp committees to give themselves total control. New throne speech, zero opposition scrutiny, legislation rammed through like a dictator on autopilot, as they've done before as well.
Yeah, proroguing government means they're basically going to go on vacation, but it's going to be a work vacation. They're going to make sure all the bills they've already researched and written up, they're going to give priority to, whether it's the 3 censorship bills they have sitting on the shelf or any number of other things. Once they have those bills passed, they're going to go hard at Alberta independence. At least I believe they will.
Yes, this isn't restructuring. It's the final nail in the Democratic debate, straight from Trudeau's scandal-dodging playbook. Remember the 2020 We Charity prorogation into full-on totalitarian control. No more HOC checks, no more accountability, just unchecked Liberal rule. And I will say, again, Carney was one of those shadowy figures that was there during the Trudeau thing. So it's more like we're seeing this continue to be implemented and as a tactic that has worked in the past.
Well, and they've been waiting for almost a decade to have a majority government so they can have unfettered rule. They have a lot of bills and things they want to pass that they haven't even put up, but they have just written up, and they're waiting in the shadows. That being said, it's a real opportunity for Alberta independence. Saskatchewan has waited too long, and I don't even know if their premier is completely on board. Luckily, Danielle Smith seems to have shifted slightly back to Alberta independence and continues to help us in very small ways, but I do appreciate she has helped us in those small ways. One of those small ways was lowering the petition of signatures that we needed, and that came in very handy for the independence movement. So as hard as I am on Danielle Smith, I liked seeing what she's done in recent times. Also, she's trying to unmuddy the waters because there was so much pushback against those other 9 questions. She said on the date of the referendum, Alberta independence question will be on the top of the pile on an independent ballot. That ballot will be counted first, and if Alberta votes for independence, they're not going to even count the 9 other questions.
But also we've mentioned that the mainstream propaganda arm of the government, that is the mainstream news and the mainstream media, has started to pay a bit more attention and focus a little bit more on this, of course, with the liberal propaganda narrative that they will always implement and that we knew part of it was going to start. But we've also seen, I don't know if they're bots, I don't know if it's actually people, but even personally on our channel, we've started to see more and more bots, people that are saying things that don't even make sense or are just going hard against Alberta independence, but without much thought behind it.
Well, it's very interesting you say that because Igor was also saying the same thing. As soon as the petition got the 177,000, the next day he started seeing bots, and a lot of them, and some real nationalists as well. Where our channel's not quite as big, but we were seeing bots too. Even with the small channel, there's only one other time we experienced bots, and that was when we were talking about Candace Owens here or there. It was obviously being flooded with bots at the time, and you can recognize them usually by their usernames and how many numbers are in their names, as well as it doesn't quite make sense what they're saying. It's generic questions. A lot of our older videos, I was looking over the comments and new comments are popping up and they don't make sense. They're framing us as an NDP channel. If anything, I'm the hardest on the NDP because the NDP is the most radical. I'm conservative and a populist by nature, and I'm a huge supporter of Alberta independence.
But you can also see, again, that these bots were almost like activated as soon as 177 news came out. And I think it'll continue to ramp up. So if you see a lot of that, or if you see a lot of insane people, sometimes in other channels or in other comments, doing other comments, or even in older videos, again, like older videos from a month ago when we were talking about this are getting new comments from recently, which is not usual activity. So I think it's going to ramp up, but try not to engage because you can get into, if it's an AI bot, you can get into a never ending discussion with a machine.
If you want to have fun with them, have fun with them. I will say this is why it is important to start reaching out to international content creators as well as US content creators, interviewing them, talking about Alberta independence so they become aware of the subject, and they'll talk about it when bigger news comes up. This is important because the Alberta independence community is very small when it comes to content creators. We profile a lot of them on the show. We have a segment every live episode. We profile one or two, as well as in our edited video section. And let me tell you, there's probably at most 20 to 25. So it's going to be very easy for the nationalists to really start botting the core channels of Alberta independence.
But I was saying this because No Apology Jay says, my God, there are a lot of people with AIDS, Alberta independence derangement syndrome out there today. The announcement of hitting the minimum threshold to trigger a referendum vote is driving them wild. It's so fun to watch them melt down and fire off obscenities. And that's also the thing. The people that are real but are against it or are starting to comment more and more now that they see that it's becoming a real possibility. I keep seeing Albertans saying, okay, give me one reason, one good reason, actual reason for Alberta to stay with Canada. What would be that good reason? And all they do is just insult the person who's asking it or say you're a traitor.
Or loyalty. Yeah. They always go back to loyalty, but National Canada hasn't been loyal to any Western province for over a decade now, except for maybe BC and the NDP, because they're just as crazy as Mark Carney and the Liberals and want to go in this globalist direction. That being said, I actually put that up there. Can you bring it back up or no?
No.
Okay, the reason I brought that up there, Jeff Rath actually started the AIDS meme, and that's what is it?
Alberta Independence Derangement Syndrome.
And it's an absolutely fantastic meme, but we need to really get our meme game up more. A lot of people don't want to be on camera or be content creators, and that's more than understandable. But maybe they're willing to make memes or do something like that. It's very important to kind of own that space. We see how important that space is. People think it's a joke space. No, it really sticks in people's heads better than a show that comes in day out, day in, that talks hardcore politics.
But also, and you have been suggesting that the whole, we saw just last weekend the No King's insanity and protests. However, King Charles will be coming to Canada soon, and it will be a great opportunity for the Alberta independence movement to literally have and take a hold of that whole insane protest and say, we are Alberta, we don't want a king either, so we want to become independent from Canada because of that too. And just as they did with the flag and nationalism, with Carney and his fake nationalism, nationalist socialism, and his elbows up thing against Trump, take the No Kings thing and actually run with it and make it into a conservative Albertan position. Well,
especially because Mark Carney is really driving to connect Canada more and more to the EU, because that is the heart of globalism. If we can undermine this idea of having a king, because King Charles is still the king of Canada, he holds a few major puppet strings, so much so he can dissolve Parliament through his representatives within Parliament, which is very interesting kinds of power. A lot of Canadians think he has absolutely zero power, or it's only ceremonial. No, most of his power is ceremonial, but there are a few puppet strings he can pull where he has major political power still over Canada. Canada never fought for its independence independence like the United States did. So those puppet strings still remain. It would be nice to see Alberta to say down with the king or no king, or having no king's protest for King Charles when he comes, to kind of really put out there in the open that this is a globalist network that's controlling Canada, and they're doing it along with the EU and the UK.
And also the EU and the UK are, in a way, the former, not just friends and colleagues, but masters also of Carney. Carney was completely embedded in that. Let's not forget he worked for the Bank of England, and he's had and played several different roles within a lot of these globalist organizations, particularly when it comes to climate change, which is why that is his insane baby that he will continue to push through. To the detriment of not just Alberta, but the rest of Canada as well.
Well, we're going to profile in our Alberta Personalities today the Prometheus Action Group. Now, it's a U.S. action group, but it deals a lot with the UK, King Charles, and how they are using Canada as a proxy against the US. And it's very interesting when you go into the details and the long-term history. So,
but you also mentioned the youth, and the youth in Canada, particularly not having or no seeing any escape plans other than to leave Canada completely, go to the US, or try to deal with it themselves within Canada, which is becoming ever more impossible. And Lee Continental, I can say it like that, did interview a bunch of them and had this whole segment. I think we're going to watch.
Yeah, he interviewed Jeff Rath the other day. So this was another good series he did. We're going to actually watch quite a bit of this. We're going to pause it throughout. Not everybody was in favor of moving to the U.S., but most of them were. And these are young Canadians that are going to a tech university. These are not hardcore separatist youth. I mean, I suspect one of them was very in favor of the independence movement, but the rest of them really came off as either non-political or liberals. And even they are wanting to leave Canada right now.
So yes, it says why so many young Canadians want to leave Canada by Ellie Continental.
Well, and I also brought this segment up, and I'm going to spend quite a bit of time on it because 41,000 people from British Columbia left last year. There's going to be probably an equal amount leaving this year, and every province is very similar numbers. They're leaving in mass, and they're all going to the United States for a better life. Now, Alberta can be that choice, and the United States or Mexico can be that safety net for them, that if they're willing to vote for Alberta independence, we should really appeal to those independence, freedom-minded people that want a better life for themselves and their children.
And that have discovered that Canada just cannot provide that, and that the plans are not for them anymore.
There are many young people in Canada today that are not feeling very optimistic about the future of the country. I know this because I am a young person myself. And I wanted to see just how bad this pessimism is. So this week I flew to Calgary and went to the Southern Alberta Institute of Technology. It's a college here in this city. And I had conversations with the students there. I asked them how optimistic or not optimistic they are about the future of Canada. And I asked them if they got offered a job in the US, a job that paid more in a country that has cheaper housing and a stronger dollar, would they take that job and move down south? Because brain drain is an increasing problem in Canada, with 40% of Canada's top one earners having moved to the US, and many other Canadians of all tax brackets also making the move down south. So without further ado, here are the conversations that I had on campus.
And pause it real quick.
Are you?
And I believe these are individuals that are going to school full time, probably had jobs before this, before they went to school to save money. These are people that have been probably fully propagandized by mainly mainstream media. And even they are recognizing the US is a better option in Canada for the majority of them, not all of them. But if these people are recognizing, you better believe there is a ton of Canadians that will move to Alberta and vote for independence before they go to the US.
You optimistic about the future of Canada right now, especially on the economic side?
Honestly, I wish I was. I think we're kind of screwed. I'll be fully honest. We have a lot of debt and very, very poor management. So yeah.
If you were offered a job in the US, and usually these jobs tend to pay more, the currency is stronger, housing is cheaper, would you take that?
I would, yeah. I'm currently in the process of going to the US. So I'm kind of doing everything in my willpower to get there. So
And pause it.
In what?
When you ask him a question about Canada, you can just see he sighs when he's thinking about the future of Canada. But when you ask him about the U.S., he cracks a smile. I mean, he can't hold it back. And that's what we want people to do when they think about Alberta and Alberta independence, especially when they're young, because these are the people that will build Alberta.
And this guy is already in Calgary. He is in Alberta.
Yeah, these people are in Calgary, but they're going to a tech university. So like I said, they're not your typical Alberta independence supporters. So it's very interesting to see their honest opinion.
What are the things that attract you about America?
I would say probably the freedom in economics, more or less. I think we have more ability with our money, and we choose where it goes, more or less. And higher payer. It's definitely if you want to make it in life. It sounds cliche, but the U.S. is there to help you out a little more.
If you got a job in the U.S. and American jobs, they're going to pay more, it's stronger.
And his number one reason for leaving wasn't economics, but it was a close second. Instantly, he said freedom. So freedom is a very important component that we can't play down. And once Carney gets that majority government, he's going to severely clamp down on freedoms. And there is going to be a hunger amongst all Canadians, especially conservative Canadians across Canada, for freedom. And that economic component is that second component that really will push them over the edge to try Alberta before they go to the United States.
But also, I think that messaging should be hammered even more into the youth, especially for example in Calgary, exactly, and that they're still thinking of the U.S. instead of making Alberta independent as the number one answer.
Because
there's a lot more work to do.
I'm going to say this. I truly believe Alberta will drastically outshine even the U.S. if they gain their independence. They voted for conservative governments for the last 93 years. It gives them a consistent ideology to go forward economically. The United States is somewhat hindered. They have a good political system, but they're a little bipolar. Every 4 or 8 years, they change their ideology and try to undo what the previous government had done.
Currency, housing is cheaper. Would you take that job and move from Canada to America?
Man, you put me on the spot there. That's a good question. I mean, it depends. I mean, if I have benefits and insurance, yeah, I would do that. But thing is, right now, with everything going on geopolitically, is the American bill or the dollar that strong? Or people are kind of losing faith in it? I mean, you never know. But yeah.
So you're unsure.
I'm not sure. There's a lot of uncertainty in the world right now. You got Iran, you got this, that. I mean, it's hard to say what the future holds. And right now, me as a college student, it's cheaper to take the bus than it is to pay for gas on a bi-weekly thing. And living off a credit card, it's like, that's not exactly what you want.
I just want to talk about the last kid, and it was an honest answer, and I respect the honest answer. That being said, he said healthcare. Somebody at that age is very unlikely to even use healthcare, but they've been so propagandized to that talking point, they don't understand the healthcare system in Canada is absolutely broken. Not until I got older did I realize it was broken and I actually had to access it.
And also that they are paying for it in taxes. It's not free, the insane amount of taxes you pay, and that doesn't even help the Canadian healthcare system because it's absolutely broken. That is where the money is coming from. It's not free, it's you just don't realize how much you're actually paying for it and how bad the service is compared to how much you actually pay for it.
Well, and also that answer is very interesting because that was one kid that he was unsure. Alberta has the best, could have potentially have the best of everything. It could have a free healthcare system with a public sector so it could work functionally. As well, it could offer the freedom benefits that the United States has.
A paid healthcare system with the public.
No, going into the real world, you don't exactly want that to be something you're expecting, is paying for high rent or gas prices or whatever. Just if prices going up and the demand or like the wages aren't going up with it, it's not a good look, and it doesn't make someone optimistic to go into the workforce moving forward.
If you were offered a job in the US, and a lot of these jobs, they pay more, the currency's stronger, houses are cheaper, would you take the job and move down south?
Probably. I definitely, I did have conversations with my mom about that. In fact, I have a family friend who is doing the exact same job, but in the States, and they're actually getting about $80,000 more, and it's the same position and everything.
And he's obviously thought about this, and he would definitely move if he's already having talks with his mom and he knows the statistical analysis there. Within Vancouver, Seattle is the closest next major city, and a job that pays $55,000 in the exact same field for the exact same position pays $110,000 in the U.S.
And Seattle isn't doing that well anyways either, but that just tiny comparison of an hour and a half trek to be able to get a bunch more money.
Well, and then you have extremely low housing prices as well as cost of living prices are dramatically reduced in the States. This is not to pump up the States. This is to say we need to appeal to these people to come to Alberta and to use the U.S. or Mexico as their backup plan before they leave Canada if they're willing to vote for independence.
Or at least to understand what the Alberta independence would mean for them. Because again, they are already in Calgary.
Well, I can't game plan out everything Carney is going to do. Is he somehow going to flood Alberta with nationalists that are citizens somehow? We need to be thinking how to appeal to national conservatives that want to come to Alberta to vote for independence, and young people are within that demographic who are currently leaving for the United States.
He's not doing anything grand, but it's $80,000 more to the very exact same position. And it's tempting because I'm like I said, the wages aren't the greatest. So if I'm getting, if it's not covering living expenses and I'm paying all this money just to not be able to make it through, I'd rather live with a wage that's affordable in the economy.
As a student, are you optimistic about the future of Canada?
The path it's going right now, no, I'd say there has to be big change, but I'd say no, not right now, no.
And if you were offered a job in the United States and these jobs tend to pay more, you got a stronger currency, housing is cheaper, would you accept that and move to the US?
Yeah, I would, yeah, absolutely. If there's good opportunity to go to the States, I would, yeah.
I literally tried to apply to get a job last year, so
And we had profiled that kid. He actually made waves when they released that clip. So this is the full version of it. And it's nice that he did a variety of individuals. This is obviously somebody from the woke left here, but it's good to hear from them too. And just that the dialogue is still open.
I could be able to, save up money in order to buy a house. I got declined, man.
So tell me more about that. Like, how hard was it to try to get a job? Because we're hearing a lot about that on the news.
I did everything, the resume, the cover letter. I literally had to go on a treasure hunt, finding all my numbers and all that, my birth certificate. And then I sent it all in, and they left me on scene, man. They left me on scene. They didn't even give me, they didn't give me no email back saying that they declined my,
They just ghosted you.
Yeah, they ghosted me. They really ghosted me.
If you were offered a job in the United States, and let's say that job offered more money than in Canada and housing.
And you can tell she's definitely from the left, but she sent this in, didn't do any follow-ups after that. An individual like this, when you appeal to Canadians from other provinces, aren't going to follow up or follow through and move to Alberta to vote for nationalism. These people just don't have the kind of follow-through a conservative or an independent-minded person that wants freedom and is willing to pack up and go to the States. Those people will move to Alberta and vote for independence.
But also with her, she mentioned there was one job that goes to her. I've had to apply for jobs within Vancouver. You usually have to do 100 to 150 to 200 just applications out there, especially now with AI and the bots and everything that a human being doesn't check your application. And you don't hear back from either most of them, and then the ones you do hear back, they usually say, no, thank you.
Well, yeah, when I refused to get the jibby jab, I lost some of my jobs. I had to look for other jobs. It was hard to find a high-paying job, so I had to take minimum wage jobs. And even for minimum wage jobs, working at a frickin' London Drugs, I had to put out 150 applications. I mean, I'm over 40 years old. I really had to suck up my pride on that one, and it did not feel good, but I did it, and I was able to leave Canada because of it.
In the US is cheaper than in Canada. Would you move to the US?
No.
Okay. Let's say there was a company in the United States that offered you a job and it paid more than what the jobs were in Canada. Would you take that job? Or is that something that interests you to move to the US if you could make more money?
Yeah, kind of, yeah. Basically. If it does give you more money, then sure.
And are you optimistic about the future of Canada?
Not really, I'd say, because of, there's a bunch of a lot of, I'd say international students and immigrants coming to Canada, and us Canadians, we don't have a bunch of other jobs to have, since other immigrants would usually take over than Canadians.
Okay, you can pause it for a moment. We always pause the show and stop the show if we do get a super chat.
Okay.
We'll read that super chat, then we'll get back into it. But he's a very interesting case, and I'm going to make a very interesting point off of his back as well.
Hold on. I hadn't seen it. I'm so sorry.
It just came in.
Thank you so much to Steve Zerfaro for the $9.99. That's a lot. Says when you post your daily reminder, include top Albertans. Great job.
Yeah, thank you, Steve. And Steve's been a longtime supporter, and he is from the United States. There is a lot of support from the United States, and it's very important. The Alberta independence movement really puts it out there. We do absolutely love the people to our south, but we do not want to be the 51st state. We want to be our own independent nation, and that's not because we don't like them or we don't agree with a lot of their policies. It's just every 4 or 8 years, you're really rolling the dice and taking a gamble, especially looking at Biden and potentially Newsom after Trump. I think that's understandable.
Thank you so much also to JP Alberta First asking, says question for both. What do you think is the biggest reason that anti-independence people do not have a good articulable reason to stay? Because there is none. Because the people that are trying to articulate it can only appeal to the way Canada used to be before it got destroyed. And they're in that cloud of cognitive dissonance that they can't look past what they think is still working, but Albertans have clearly noticed that that isn't.
Well, something that happened during the Jibby Jab era and the trucker convoy, a lot of conservatives all across Canada became very politically active, and the glasses came off and they seen all the issues for what they are. Even Pierre Poilievre supporters know what these issues are. And Alberta independence is an actual chance to change those, not like a national vote for conservatism. We were educated during that time politically. So we've been asking these questions and how to fix this. And Carney just keeps going, and Trudeau as well keeps going in the opposite direction, creating more and more and more problems. Liberals have never really looked at the in-depth problems of Canada. So when you bombard them with things, they just have never thought of this. Again, conservatives have really had years to think about this now. And Alberta independence is really everything is coalescing with Alberta independence in an Albertan level. But I think it really needs to coalesce on a national level, and national conservatives need to get behind it. There's a good possibility they will if Mark Carney gets a majority government on the 12th of next month through the by-elections.
But also because a lot of the things that they come out and try to say to get people to stay or against Alberta independence is like, oh, but free healthcare, you're not going to have free healthcare. And it's like, yeah, but the system doesn't work. Healthcare is completely broken. And then when you break down the actual numbers and what's actually going on, they go, oh, well, but then by being Canadian and the heritage and the history, and it's like, yeah, Albertans can keep that too, just away and separate from Canada, who has completely decimated it as well. And they've completely gone against their own Canadian heritage and their own Canadian pride. So they've gone towards the alphabet community pride and just that one. So with every single point they try to give, once you explain to them what's going on, and you for them to try to look at it from a sane person's perspective, their whole argument falls apart.
Well, there's also no grassroots movement or education process with nationalism, because there just isn't. The smartest person on the nationalist side, even though I don't like him, I will admit he's the best they got. And that's a sad state of he's the best they got. And that is Jason Kenney. And when you see him go into a debate, he's the one that's thinking about this for months and months and months, and it's on his back to come up with the best arguments, and he just can't do it. He has to straw man things or look at things with rose-colored glasses, talking about the history of Canada and how we have to remain loyal, completely ignoring how Canada's turned its back on Alberta. That being said, people are looking at Jason Kennedy. People are looking at the people that are asking the questions and the content creators on the Liberal side or the nationalist side, and they're not making arguments. And the few little arguments they are making, the grassroots movement without an Alberta independence is really taking those videos, giving them Keith Wilson, asking him live, can you answer this? And he answers it. And almost everybody in the Alberta independence movement that's a content creator can answer these basic questions that are really straw men of our positions.
But thank you so much again to Steve Zerfaro and JP Alberta First for that question and for the super chats.
Yeah,
but
thank
now
you.
Let's go back into this. And you said you had
Yeah, I want to talk about this kid a little bit. Obviously, at some point, his parents would have been immigrants into Canada. He's obviously a full Canadian, and he views himself as a full Canadian, which he is. What I'm going to say is we have to make the appeal to new immigrants into Canada. If they have their PR or they have their citizenship and they're going to be able to vote, we have to make it clear they are going to get Albertan citizenship. And what that means is you've won the lottery. It doesn't mean you can bring everybody back home into Alberta, because if you do, what's going to happen is it's going to turn to that country you came from, just like the rest of Canada is beginning to turn into China and to India. They understand that. And it seems a lot of people say that's a harsh argument. You make that argument, you're going to lose that voter. No, if they already have their citizenship, they understand Alberta independence is a lottery ticket. This is why so many immigrants that actually had citizenship or came into the United States the legal way actually voted for Trump. And when you watch them be interviewed, they said just that. Those are the people that are hardest on immigrants coming into the country legally. So make the appeal to legal immigrants that already have their citizenship within Alberta that it is a lottery ticket, not just to freedom, but to wealth and prosperity and liberty.
So you think like the U.S. has a bit more of those opportunities for young people?
I'd say yeah, because they usually they prioritize more on their citizens than, you know.
Told me you're in school at the moment. If you were offered a job in your field in the US, and there's a lot of jobs in the US, they pay more, housing is cheaper, the dollar is stronger, would you move to the United States?
Depending on where it is, maybe.
Okay.
Yeah.
And
If it was California.
And this kid's, I've already watched this, but this kid's answers are interesting because he is a pro independent supporter, but even him, he's very reluctant to come out.
Probably not. But if it was somewhere nice, I'd definitely give it a good thought.
Okay. And what makes you give it a good thought and not say no? Like, do you think America is a place that has more opportunities for young people?
I can't talk too much on how many opportunities are there, but if I got a job opportunity and it was paid better than here, then probably.
And are you optimistic about the future of Canada?
Yeah, I think if enough people put together a change that they want, it can be changed, whether it be separation or through the government of Canada. Yeah.
And I think he has hope. And he doesn't want to leave Canada because he's the one person with the Alberta flag flying behind him. And he mentioned independence or separation from Canada. So I think a lot of youth that are already in Alberta do see hope in Alberta independence. And if it goes wrong, I guarantee you, if you re-interview him, he'll probably say at that point, no, there is no more hope. And it's time for the U.S. The U.S. and Mexico are great safety nets. But if you're thinking about migrating there from Canada, first, consider Alberta, especially if you're willing to vote for independence.
But especially the youth, those people that they're already there in Calgary, you have to be able to talk to them and talk amongst each other about independence and what it means, about what it would mean to form a new nation and the opportunities herein. Because I don't know how, because he published it today, but I don't know when those interviews took place. But especially now with the signatures and having the signatures and the real hope and possibility even further strengthened through this and through all the canvassers and etc. I think if people don't talk to each other, then you can't continue to convince and continue to put that as the exit ramp, the exit strategy away from Canada, especially for the young people that are seeing it day to day with the people not getting jobs, with the people saying, well, I would make way more over there than over here. Talking and talk about, no, with an independent Alberta, you will, and this and this and that.
Well, also, it's important to talk to people outside of Alberta again. And I'm going to start preaching this message a little bit more in national Canada and the United States, as well as the international media, because what's going to happen come the summertime, the mainstream media is going to think they can say something, and the only people speaking back are small independent channels. If they know American media, mainstream media, international mainstream media is going to talk back against them, if they try to sit a false narrative, they're going to think twice, and they're going to really have to give at least a little bit more balanced coverage than they normally would have. I would like to say one more thing. Can we give a shout out to that channel of the content we just played?
Yes, so Ellie Continental, there we go.
And he's a great channel. If you do subscribe, he does a lot of good interviews. He interviewed Jeff Rath. I know I played the entire piece of content, but this is something I bring up on almost every show. And I'm glad somebody made a piece of content, went out and interviewed young people and asked them, would they move to the United States, or would they take a job there? And do they see hope in Canada? These are the questions I wanted to ask. I'm glad he did that. And it really, I think, is going to help me drive home the point of we need to appeal to people in other provinces that are conservative to move to Alberta. Sorry to harp on it so much, but it's something I've been doing a lot over the last few weeks, and I think it needs to be a strategy for independence.
But Alberta independence people as well, if you're older, or if you see the youth and you see them all lost and think they're all woke and weird and have these insane socialist ideas and they only want to vote for the NDP and the crazies. No, they don't. I worked in two different high schools in Vancouver with young people that were about to enter college. A lot of them are sick, incredibly sick and tired of being propagandized for their entire lives with this liberal bullshit and this liberal crap. And they are very, very much almost without a platform or fully knowing where they stand, but clearly with more conservative values and sick and tired of the alphabet community and the climate change thing, and being propagandized through their teachers, their parents even. Well, and now the almost popular position or the rebellious position is to be conservative, because for some of them, even their parents are very, very liberal and they want to go against that. So you have a bunch of young kids there that you could, again, speak with and speak to and help form towards Alberta independence.
Well, you also have to realize a lot of these young kids that are coming into the country, we're being flooded with immigration. Mm-hmm. And back home in a lot of the countries they come from, they have natural conservative values. They don't even know what wokeism is until they come to this country. And although they might try to accept it to fit in, at their core, their parents at home have actually taught them conservative values. And if they do already have citizenship status, they will vote for Alberta independence because it's obvious to anybody it's a freaking lottery ticket if Alberta gets its independence and you're a citizen of Alberta.
But now I'll quickly read some of your comments before we go to...
Sorry, not a lottery ticket. It's a lottery jackpot.
Yes. I'll read some of your comments before we go to the next segment pretty quickly. But Steve Zafaro says, exactly, he doesn't have skin in the game, but Mario can influence. He needs to state the positives for Alberta first. And that is very easy to do as well.
And I'm glad he did it. And this is before, and he did it before Mark Carney's got a majority. So I give it to him there as well. I understand he's a nationalist, but he's viewing it from an honest standpoint, and he's giving the statistics and an educated point of view. So I appreciate that. And I really think not only Mario, but a lot of other content creators will be coming around on the 12th of this month.
And with Mario or whoever we profile or talk about, it doesn't mean that we fully agree with 100% of the things they've said, because I've seen people say, oh, why do you profile X or Y or Z? Because in whatever we're profiling and talking about, maybe they have the correct stance or the opposite stance that we do, but we want to talk about it. So again, and I've seen people also react like that with other content creators when they bring someone else up and they say, oh, but he is horrible, blah, blah, blah. And it's like, yes, but there's a reason why we choose to talk about X, Y, or Z person. And Steve Zafar also says, I have no patience for those that play both sides. Same, which is why with Pierre Poilievre, I've been kind of against him for a while.
And yeah, typically I don't have any patience. The one person I'm having a little bit of patience with that is playing both sides is Danielle Smith, because she has really helped us out to this point by changing the number of signatures, coming around and saying if the independence question is successful, she's not going to count the other ballots. And there's a point in time, and we've covered it on the path to independence. Danielle Smith actually plays a big part if the vote goes for independence. We need her to be the one to stand up and push the negotiations, so the team with the negotiations comes in behind her. So she's going to be a very pivotal figure in a few points. And I've been hard on her in the past, and I'll be hard on her in the future if I feel her going towards the nationalist side. And I understand she's a nationalist politician. That being said, she's the best premier within Canada. I mean, they're all nationalists, but she's the one person that's helping independence more than any other premier. So
Primores 007, hello, says, hola, Nat y Guy. I am here again. Thank you so
Thank
much.
you.
Says, looking forward to another good show. Hit the likes and subscribe, folks.
And subscribing does help us more than absolutely anything. So
Primores 007 says, the internet never forgets after all. And exactly. And that is why I am able to bring up points when Pierre Poilievre decided to wait way too long before and wait until the polls came out to be able to take a stance, for example, with the truckers convoy.
well, yeah, and that's the thing with Jason Kenney. He's willing to get into
that too.
He'll get into the debates, but I mean, as this thing goes on and goes into the summertime and he starts slinging mud at the Alberta independence movement, there's all kinds of clips during the Jibby Jab era and truckers convoy as well that we're going to be bringing back up. I mean, I'll keep it cordial with him if he keeps it cordial with us. And I do appreciate him stepping up to do a debate with Professor Party and Keith Wilson, because no other nationalists are stepping up right now. They're scared.
And I'll hammer through these next ones. Order Divine Warrior says, good. Steve Zafaro says, also time to cross-post on Truth Social. I think we tried, and for some reason we weren't able to.
Yeah.
I think maybe because we're in Mexico. I don't know.
And I will say one other thing. We read comments at the end of each section. We have about 6 sections. Each one deals with a different part of Alberta independence.
Yes. Joe Rush says, hello, everyone. Hello, Joe. Thank you for being here. Says, hope you are all having a great day. Cheers. And make sure you smash the like, share, and subscribe buttons. Yes, it does help a lot. Thank you so much. And Rafa, hello, Rafa. Hope everything is going well and you're getting enough sleep, says hi. Says hello. And Macmillan GB says, I thought Clyde moved to the States. And I wanted to get to that comment because he continues to say that he's planning to move to the States soon. I think around June, maybe?
Yeah, he can because he's a dual citizen, but he's having issues with his wife. They're trying to do it the correct way, which is, it's always good to see people immigrating the legal way.
And again, it took us 4 years to save up with multiple jobs, working 12-hour plus days, especially you, but even me working 12 hours plus days. And it took 4 years to do it all and then pack and then figure out how to move there and how to move our stuff here and how to do everything else that was needed to be done. So it's not an easy, fast process.
Well, and Clyde actually
We're in Mexico, by the way.
Clyde does a lot of content creation with other people, especially with his live show now, whether it's Mark Nixon or quite a few other national content creators. And he does talk about Alberta independence a lot. So I think he is going to be a real thorough way to hopefully bring on other nationalist content creators to start profiling Alberta independence, just like Mario did.
And again, if you don't know our story for some reason, I am from Mexico. I went to live and study in Canada, in Vancouver, met you. We decided that the country was going to shit, and then we decided to move back to Mexico before the Alberta independence movement was even a thing happening, because we moved a while ago.
Yeah, and I actually lived half in Canada, half in the United States, even though I was born in Canada. That is why I know U.S. politics so well.
Mm-hmm. Okay, now let's move on to, speaking of politics, Alberta politics.
He doesn't discuss federal politics. He only concerns himself with Alberta's independence.
Oh, oops, I left a chat there. Okay. Starting with, hold on, I'm not prepared today. Starting with Marty up north saying, quote, I'm at the Cornerstone Conference in Calgary. There are over 600 people here. The first speaker was reluctant economist Martin Armstrong. His closing advice to Canadians was, don't let Carney align Canada with the European Union. They're actively trying to start a war with Russia.
And I've talked a lot about this. I think the most recent video we made was about EU and Canada kind of wanting to merge. Mm-hmm. That being said, we also profiled Martin Armstrong the other day. It may have been yesterday or the day before. He is an American economist that is highly regarded by a lot of different nations that bring him in to advise. It's good to see he's on the side of Alberta independence. I followed him for quite a while, and he has been a long-term supporter of Alberta independence, regularly coming up to conferences about Alberta independence well over a year ago. He was one of the first people I actually heard about it from. So when Alberta does get its independence, he's going to be somebody hopefully we can bring in and try to help advise with whether it's a transitional dollar or how we want to arrange the Alberta economy, because he is very, very knowledgeable.
But also with the whole don't let Carney align with the European Union, we made that video and we got a lot of comments, again, not sure if they're bots or not, saying that's never going to happen. You're insane. Nobody's talking about this. This isn't even a thing. Oh, it is. And we prove it in that video, but also with people and rumblings that continue to grow and grow about that possibility. Yes, it's going to be very hard, but it's not impossible. And the idea is already kind of there.
I don't even think it's going to be that hard, especially with Mark Carney's 30 by 30 plan. This is going to make sure provinces can't have an independence movement like Alberta in the future. It's a huge land grab. The EU's plan was always Russia, World War III, and to take the $74 trillion worth of natural resources and be on top of the world for another 50 or 100 years. It's not going so well, the conflict with Russia, and they're very unsure if they can even win that if they escalate it after Trump's out of office. They're trying to wait Trump out to escalate that conflict. That being said, I think they're looking at Canada as that backup plan. Mark Carney is a traditional globalist who has built a lot of this architecture with the globalists from the EU, and that's why this 30 by 30 plan is so dangerous. He wants to take the natural resources of Canada and divide it up amongst his globalist buddies and these globalist organizations. That's why he doesn't want to touch it right now. He wants to put Canada in an absolute spot so they're having to accept socialism and communist ideals. Once he has control of the natural resources and he unites the EU and Canada, he'll start accessing that. But it won't go to the provinces. It won't go to Canadians. It will go to support this globalist ideal.
To maintain and support the New World Order, as he said, in China. And again, his alignment with China also has to do with this. And if they can continue to prop up that order that they had planned for so long and that was working for them, not for the citizens or anybody else, then they'll do anything in their power. And now, right now, they have power to try and keep it up and even strengthen it even further.
Yeah, and we have a story later coming up. He's sending more emissaries over to China right now and aligning with them. Every day, it seems like, let's not talk to the U.S., our biggest trading partner that always has and should and always will be, and start falling into the arms of China.
However, Alberta itself, even before it gains independence, is trying to do something, even though part of it might have been their own fault. Jeff Rat says, quote, it's a weak start. We need a requirement for every employer to post a $50,000 bond in order to hire a foreign worker, because Alberta has tabled Bill 26 requiring businesses to register with the province before hiring through the Federal Temporary Foreign Worker Program. The bill also creates a licensing system for immigration consultants with penalties including fines and up to 12 months.
Then leave it there for a minute. And I do agree with Jeff Rath here. And if Alberta gets its independence, these are the kind of policies you can actually get.
And
as long as you're working within the framework of a national Canada, this policy that Danielle Smith is putting forward is the best policy you can get under a nationalist government. You're not going to be able to go further than that. I'm thankful she is putting up a policy like this, but again, it's not far enough. And there's just too many barriers to actually do the things Alberta needs to do to make the changes it needs to change.
And the temporary foreign worker program used to be mostly only reserved for agricultural workers, mainly coming from Mexico and I believe Haiti or somewhere there. I had a friend that worked at the Mexican consulate with this whole program, and it got increased and it got way more expanded during the Trudeau era. Again, before it was very, very few and limited migrants that would come, work, and then would leave again. That's what the whole thing used to be about, especially for, again, agricultural workers. But then it also says there a licensing system for immigration consultants, which I think is very important because particularly for countries like India or China, they are having pathways and ways where they can kind of collude almost with each other. Number one, lie to the people that they're saying they're going to get these amazing jobs in Canada, but then they get there and they're not amazing. But at the same time, flooding Canada with a faster way to get more and more people in. So I think it is a good idea to get at least the licensing system, if not just not have any.
Yeah, we showed the immigration stats on this show, and it used to be heavily favored to China. Now India is way up here. Every other country is way down here. And this is the Canadian strategy. I mean, I understand Danielle Smith can't put a moratorium on immigration because she's attached to the federal government in a lot of ways. That being said, I would like to see her put a diversity of different countries, and you can't get this many people from India and nobody else from these other countries. If you're going to have immigration, at least make it diverse and have quotas from specific countries that are going to integrate very well with Alberta. That being said, I would like to see a temporary moratorium and the whole system reevaluated. That can only happen under Alberta independence.
Yes. Once Alberta gets to decide how it wants to deal with its own country. But right now, also, Alberta is trying to do something regarding education. Juno News says, quote, Alberta's Bill 25 aims to keep schools neutral, teaching students how to think, not what to think, as they do right now. Students should be able to explore ideas respectfully, hear different perspectives, and engage in conversation. That's how we build critical thinking, which has been completely forgotten about in Canada.
Yeah, and we're going to see the teachers' union reaction to this, which is absolutely ridiculous, but this is fantastic. It's a great first step. And
First step.
The education system needs to be completely revamped. It's an indoctrination system, especially within Canada. Alberta's the best in Canada, but it's seeped in deep in even Alberta. So things need to change once independence happens.
I'd like to review how we're keeping classrooms and schools neutral and impartial so that we can remain focused on what matters the most. The proposed changes will help ensure education being delivered in the classroom is impartial and free from personal bias. This bill reflects that schools should teach students how to think, not what to think. Students should be able to explore ideas respectfully.
And that's when I went to school, it was critical thinking is what we were taught. How to think, not what to think.
Respectfully, hear different perspectives, and engage in conversation, as long as they follow, of course, the applicable codes of conduct. That's ultimately how we build critical thinking and respectful citizenship. School boards would be expected to stay focused on their core responsibilities and avoid taking positions on political or ideological issues that fall outside of their scope. The changes would also protect employees from being required to participate in activities that may conflict with their personal beliefs, unless participation is part of the approved curriculum or instruction. Additionally, we are setting out clear province-wide expectations, as I mentioned, for schools by requiring the display of the Canadian flag, the Alberta flag in schools, and the playing of the national anthem on a weekly basis. These requirements reinforce the importance of shared civic symbols that unite students, that unite families and communities as Albertans and Canadians. Subsequent regulations will allow for exemptions and provide additional clarity, including definitions. Ultimately, this policy supports a sense of belonging and shared identity while keeping the focus where it belongs on students' learning and success in the classroom.
And yeah, it's a good policy and it's a good first step here. And I'm glad that they're looking into it. If you're able to keep the Bible out of school, you should be able to keep all these other flags and ideologies out of school as well. It's a direct contradiction and it's an indoctrination process, which not only the institutions of college are obviously doing, but it's trickled all the way down to elementary school into very young ages.
But yes, because the target is always to get them while they're young. And so they can become the foot soldiers of the revolution. Again, going to the Marxist style of education, Paulo Freire, etc. I'm not going to get into it, but I've done a lot of research about this. Again, I worked at two high schools in Vancouver, and the students themselves are fed up with this. They don't want any of this, and they're actually looking to almost educate themselves outside of the paradigm of school, because even if you go into the syllabi of several different courses, classes, and even grades, it's fully ingrained and embedded. And I think even if Alberta is, and this is a good first step, didn't love the whole belonging thing he said there at the end. That is one of the code words that the DEI woke crowd uses and is started to use now. So I would take the belonging away from it. But I think also homeschooling should be a very viable and important option that, for example, Alberta should look into.
Schools, nations right now are taking away the option of homeschooling. A lot of countries within the EU are banning homeschooling. The UK is trying to do it right now. And as you said, young people are trying to educate themselves out of this, and they're doing it online and in social media. And this is why governments around the world are banning access to the internet for under 16-year-olds. That should be in the hands of the parents, not of the government.
And the responsibility also of the parents. Let's also not forget the role and the responsibilities of parents within this whole system.
Well,
that's what the government wants to do. They want to take away the responsibilities, but also the parental rights the parents have over their children, and they themselves be the parents of everybody
not
else.
necessarily. In some instances, they want to give more responsibility to the children. Trying to lower the age of consent to 12 years old for a lot of things,
but again,
or 16-year-old.
But that is removing the role of the parent itself.
Yeah, but okay.
And putting it in the hands of the government.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is, but what you were saying was you want the government's trying to take that role, but in certain instances, they're not. They want to lower the age of voting to 16. They want to lower the age of medical consent to 12, which is crazy.
Yes. But that removes parental rights and the actual responsibilities that parents do have over their children until they become adults. However, the school boards are not happy.
And this is their reaction. And of course, this is their reaction.
From Paul Mitchell saying, quote, so requiring the taxpayer-funded teachers of Alberta's children to be politically neutral is offensive to teachers, eh? And yes, apparently political neutrality mandate in Alberta classrooms is offensive to teachers. The union says.
And again, this just shows that this is infected deep within the Alberta school system through the teachers union. They should not have this reaction to this whatsoever, but they do.
Mm-hmm. And again, the fact that it's offensive shouldn't matter to anybody, especially when it comes to the education of young minds.
Yeah.
Ridiculous. But we also see Maxime Bernier agreeing with Premier Smith. This is one of the first saying, quote, I agree with Premier Smith. The NDP has the new communist leader. Western Standard says they're pretty communist, yes. And we played the video yesterday of Daniel Smith warning that Avi Lewis and his new NDP is threatening Alberta's oil and gas. Get out now.
Yeah, and I profile Maxime Bernier quite a lot because he's on the national stage and he's outside of Alberta, but he agrees with all the fundamental principles of Alberta independence. So it's a good voice because somebody like him will be able to back up Danielle Smith's plays when she does lean towards independence. Pierre Poilievre can no longer do that. He's distinctively chosen a side. If on the 12th of next month he loses and Carney gets that majority government, I expect him to go even harder at Alberta independence.
Mm-hmm. We also say this from Keith Wilson saying, quote, the federal government does not own any land in Alberta outside of the national parks, military bases, and First Nations reserves. Alberta owns the land. Another con from Mark Carney, because he came out to say, we have a responsibility to protect Canada's extraordinary natural heritage, from our lakes and forests to our mountains and coastlines. Our new nature strategy, again, spending $3.8 billion, will protect up to 2.4 million kilometers squared of lands and oceans and mobilize.
And leave it here. This is not about I don't care how much money you're spending. This is a UN land grab that will prevent independence from any other province after Alberta, number one. This is the segue into tokenization of natural resources. This is how the federal government federalizes all natural resources in Canada. This is just the beginning. And they're doing the other land grab in BC on a different front. There's some parallels within it, but this is on a national stage. This is very dangerous. I'm going to keep profiling this 30 by 30 plan. People will call me crazy. And then you're going to see, especially when Carney gets that majority government, oh my God, there was a bigger play here.
Maybe the guy wasn't that crazy.
Well, there's enough natural resources within Canada, even if Alberta leaves, to kind of fulfill all the globalists' dreams. They have to finance this somehow. Originally, it was the United States, but Donald Trump has really thrown a monkey wrench into all of that.
Yep. Okay, now we'll go into some comments and go to the next section, which is Alberta Personalities, and we will be profiling Prometheus or Promethean Action.
Promethean Action Group.
There we go.
A fantastic resource.
Edward says, I am an alum of SAIT. Interesting. That college where he was asking
fantastic.
questions. Cool. Well, I hope you're proud of the new alumni.
Well, ask him if it's
Alumnus there.
I know it's I believe it's a tech college, but ask him if it's more conservative or liberal. Probably it's in Alberta. I'm guessing conservative, but.
Well, you can ask him yourself.
Well, yeah, he'll answer in the comments.
Macmillan GB says, love the camera guy framing Brookfield over the kid's shoulder. Oh, I didn't catch that. I'll go back and try to look at it on Ellie's video. Glenn Gunn, hello, says Clyde moves in the summer. Yeah, that's, I think, what I had heard from him too. Again, it's not easy to move out, even if you're right there, even if you have citizenship.
Again, that's just going to be another content creator, and there's not a lot of them that are going to be committed to talking about Alberta independence that are outside of the country, because when Carney gets that majority, it could be censorship, city, and arrest for content creators that are talking about certain subjects.
Trevor says, she applied to one job, LOL. Gen X here, we applied to hundreds and hoped the law of average would kick in. And also says, P.S. we didn't have computers. We walked business to business every day.
Yeah, but this is the good thing. These liberals will not relocate to Alberta to vote for nationalism and to keep Alberta part of Canada. But independence-minded people are already pulling the parachute to move to the States. We can appeal to those people to move to Alberta, vote for independence. If for some reason the vote goes awry, they can always go to the United States or down here in Mexico.
Cole, hello, Cole says, hey everyone, thank you for being here. And
it's Cole. I remember him yesterday.
Says, and also took a part-time job while we looked for a full-time job. And the motivation factor was a lot stronger with older generations than the current ones. Also because I think nobody's really taught them or told them how the things work. Again, they've been propagandized throughout the whole school career towards things that are pointless and useless while not teaching them how to actually go out there and live a life.
But I also think they've lost hope in a way. It's a new generation. The way hiring's done now, corporations are giving incentives of 30% to hire immigrants. All the jobs are going to immigrants. I mean, if I had to apply for 150 jobs, imagine somebody with no experience, how many jobs? 1,000 jobs? What do you expect from these kids? I mean, and they don't have the same kind of intestinal fortitude I would have because I'm an older person. They're losing hope. And this is one big thing we need to appeal to the youth.
And you can capitalize on that too, again, for the independence movement.
Yeah. And we need to start thinking about this. We're going to start moving past signatures. Hopefully we can keep gathering, but there's a chance the signature portion may be done soon. And if it is, we need to start really game planning outside of the box, appealing to American content creators, appealing to people in other provinces that are ready to leave. How are we going to make memes? How do we want to capture the space? How do we appeal to people in Alberta versus people on a national level and an international level? How do we get more debates? How do we get nationalists to actually step up because they're scared?
Glenn Gunn says, I remember walking to job sites.
Yeah.
And Troglodyte says, they can always leave too. Yeah. Glenn Gunn says, Kenny has a good enough argument that will keep some voters on the side or in the no side. Mr. Keith Wilson will push a few more on the side of independence. We need a leader.
Yeah, we need a leader. And that's another thing we need to push now. Keith Wilson needs to be that leader. I'm not going to mix my words. A lot of other people are saying the same thing, especially come the summertime. You can't have a million voices. So the mainstream media can pick one or two crazy people out of it and say, this is the independence narrative. We need somebody to be the face of the movement. When somebody says something crazy, they say, no, we don't want to be the 51st state. We want to be our own independent nation or any number of other things. We also need a face because there's going to be an interim government if Alberta independence is successful. And we need somebody that really engages trust in the general public that the interim government is not going to be captured by corporations or other political figures.
And what did worry me as well is that, again, I've started seeing after the signatures threshold being met, I do see people talking about Alberta independence outside of Alberta, outside of Canada, here in Latin America, but saying and framing it as, oh, now they want to become the 51st state. And no, that is not the case. So I will continue to try to do my work in Spanish and say that, no, that's not the case. But I think it is needed that more and more people from the movement itself go and talk to others, independent media outside, and even mainstream media outside of Canada.
Well, especially big mainstream media creators within the United States. You want somebody that has their head on straight, knows the points inside and out, like Keith Wilson, to go on these big shows, because you don't want fringe ideas kind of getting out there in the mainstream media in Canada being able to set the narrative.
Dara Robinson, and this is good, says, hi Nat and Guy, hello. Says, off topic, I have a lot of Native First Nation friends, and I asked 20 of them, do you support independence? And surprisingly, 18 out of the 20 said, yes, let's go Alberta.
Absolutely fantastic. And I'm glad.
But I'm not that surprised either.
No, I'm not at all. I've always said the elites of the First Nations are using the tribes, and it needs to stop. And I'm glad Keith Wilson came out and he's just started addressing the topic honestly. And it says you have three choices. You can stay with Canada even once Alberta separates and keep the deal you want. You can bring that deal to Alberta and we'll most likely accept it, or you can renegotiate that deal with Alberta. So nothing needs to change, but it's all up to each individual tribe as well. What this does when you're open and transparent about it, you're going to have 18 out of 20 people that are tribal members and not tribal elites vote for independence. Yeah. I know other leaders within the Alberta independence movement were not trying to address the issue, and we're scared to address that issue. So I'm glad Keith Wilson really came out and just put the honest facts on the table. And that's what we need to do with every single group.
Glengon says, we need the young vote. And I think that is one of the most important ones, because there are some of the most affected by it and some of the ones that can do the biggest change long term as well within a free Alberta. But now let's move on to Alberta Personalities. Again, we're profiling Promethean Action.
Yeah.
But they need to understand that Albertans are done, we're leaving, and there's no more conversation to be had. I know that's upsetting to people.
Starting with, hold on.
It's Promethean Action Group.
Promethean, okay, yeah, Promethean, I can see it there.
And we're going to profile three separate videos here. Some of them are about Canada, some of them aren't. They focus mainly on US politics, but they focus a lot on the UK. This is a resource that they do know a lot about Canada, and they know the history of global influence on Canada and how Canada is being used as a proxy. I'm going to try to hopefully reach out to them, and it would be great if we can get some American content creators to really support Alberta independence vocally.
So Ben from Promethean Action says, over 450 financial institutions, 130 plus trillion in assets, all aligned to cut off capital to American industry. This isn't a market. This was a coordinated policy deindustrialization from the City of London.
Over $130 trillion in global financial assets were turned against American industry, and most people have no idea it happened. In 2015, the governor of the Bank of England, Mark Carney, launched a campaign to make climate change a central criterion for global banking and lending. By 2021, his initiatives had united over 450 financial institutions controlling over $130 trillion in assets, all committed to restricting capital flows to energy-intensive industries. Mining, extraction, processing, fossil fuels. The very industries America needs to rebuild were systemically cut off from financing. Major banks refused to fund Arctic energy projects. Some committed to ending coal financing entirely. This wasn't a free market. It was a deliberate policy of deindustrialization imposed by the City of London financial empire dressed up in green rhetoric. We just released a new deep dive on how the Trump administration is breaking this.
Okay, and you can leave it there. And again, Mark Carney is one of the architects, and he's the globalist, really enemy of the United States, and that's why he's not going to get a deal. That's why he wants to deindustrialize Canada. That's why he wants to tokenize and nationalize the natural resources, taking those resources away from Albertans and every single other province. Saskatchewan needs to get going on their independence movement if they want to even have any kind of chance.
Mm-hmm. No, so Maggie Weiss.
And I will say, Susan Kokinda here, she is the face of Promethean Action. It's her and another founding member that's an older woman as well. They are absolutely fantastic. If you see them online, she's typically the face of Promethean Action, and she's fantastic.
So Susan Kokinda says, it's not about Russia and China, it's about the British. Hold on. There we go.
Everyone keeps saying it's about Russia and China. And yes, there are Russian and Chinese elements to this. But what if they aren't your main enemy? What if the real concern is Britain and Canada? Now pull out a map and look at the world from the North Pole down. Greenland sits right between Britain and North America. And of course, the northern part of North America is Canada. What's the significance of that? Think about this geography when we look at War Plan Red, because War Plan Red was a contingency plan for war with Britain, and Canada was the key proxy. This plan was approved and updated under the tenure of Navy Secretary Charles Francis Adams III.
Pause it for a moment. Now, this is not just something she's bringing out of her head. She's been doing research from this since the 1970s, and she's identified the civil war that's been happening between the UK and the United States behind the scenes. Now, it died down for a little bit because the globalists had control of the United States, or it appeared to be that way, but it's really flaring up right now because Trump is in office.
Well, names do matter in history. Charles Francis Adams III was not just a bureaucrat. He was the great-grandson of President John Quincy Adams, and he was the grandson of Charles Francis Adams Sr. Why is that significant? Because Charles Francis Adams Sr. was Abraham Lincoln's minister to Britain during the Civil War. He was the man on the ground in London, and he was the key figure who prevented the empire from diplomatically recognizing the Confederacy. This family understood the game. The grandfather spent the 1860s preventing the British from destroying the Union diplomatically. The grandson spent the 1920s preparing contingencies for a British attack on the U.S. They understood that the Republic and the Empire are incompatible forms of government. And for the last 80 years, we've forgotten that lesson. But Donald Trump is simply dusting off a modern version of War Plan Red, a war for political and economic sovereignty from empires and monarchies.
And it's going to be very interesting what happens with in Iran, because there's a lot of chaos there. And when he pulls out, the United States does not need that oil. And who needs it? The EU and the UK. If they want to secure the Strait of Hormuz, Trump is telling them to do it on last night's speech. They're the one that are losing big right now. He's creating massive chaos within the UK and the EU. And I think that's the big target. That being said, I highly recommend Promethean Action Group. We do have one more clip for them just so you can get an idea of their content. This one, they're talking about American independence, but I think a lot of what he's saying could definitely be related to Alberta and Alberta independence. And it's the same like strain of thought and soul.
The American Revolution have happened. Could it have succeeded in a culture of pleasure seeking, in a culture of escapism, of cynicism, of men and women who had decided that comfort was the highest good, that the next high was worth more than the next generation? Think about who actually built this country. Alexander Hamilton was born on the island of Nevis, a small, forgotten speck in the Caribbean. Illegitimate, orphaned by 13, no family name to trade on, no inheritance, no connections. By rights, history should never have heard of him. But Hamilton looked at the cause of American independence and saw something larger than himself, larger than his suffering, larger than his circumstances, and he gave everything to it. He was 20 years old when he was commanding artillery at the Battle of Trenton. He was writing the Federalist Papers at 32. He built the financial architecture of a nation from scratch, and he was killed by British agent Aaron Burr. Henry Knox was a bookseller. A bookseller. 25 years old, running a bookshop in Boston when the war broke out. But he had read every military treatise he could get his hands on, not because anyone told him to, but because he hungered for something greater. Washington, General Washington, sent him to retrieve the cannons from Fort Ticonderoga in the dead of winter. Knox dragged 60 tons of artillery across frozen lakes and mountain passes 300 miles and delivered them to Dorchester Heights, forcing the British to evacuate Boston without a single shot fired. A bookseller did that. James Monroe was an orphan at 16, responsible for his younger siblings.
And
he crossed the Delaware with Washington.
And we can kind of leave it there, but what I would say is Albertans are the kind of people that pull themselves up by the bootstraps. It's not this elite intellectuals that the Laurentian elites look at themselves like, the people that live in Ontario that think they're running the country. You need to separate yourself from those people. Great men that did not have great beginnings were able to build a great nation in the United States, and Alberta can do the same.
And it's the same type of stock of the salt of the earth, stock of the people that are able to do so, because the elites and those that think themselves very smart aren't so much when reality comes knocking at the door.
Well, they want to come in after. They want to come in from the City of London, the UK, assassinate your leaders and try to take control of the country.
They want to take what's already been built, and they said then say that they are the ones that built it.
Yeah,
essentially. But we also have this.
And the other person we're profiling today is actually Danielle Smith. She has turned back towards independence slightly, so I appreciate a lot of what she has done for independence. That being said, I'm going to continue to be hard on her when she does things I don't like, but as of right now, she's in the good books of independence, I think, or at least in my good book, but the nationalists are absolutely hating her right now. And she's in a tough position because she is a national politician. And the nationalists are hating on her, and she's going to get a lot of hate from the independence movement as well anytime she steps out of line.
So they're saying we need to have a conversation about Danielle Smith. Why is it that this woman is allowed to be a public official and yet does everything she can to cause sedition and separation from Alberta to Canada?
We need to have a conversation about Danielle Smith. Why is it that this woman is allowed to be a public official and yet do everything she can to cause sedition and separation?
And pause it. These are legal actions put forth within the Canadian legal framework, within the Constitution. She's just making sure the people of Alberta actually have their voice and can take a vote. That's all she's doing. She's not doing anything illegal or outside the bounds, but that's how they're going to try to frame her, and that's how they're going to try to frame every single person in Alberta independence.
And it's also one of the most democratic processes you could have, a vote for the citizens by the citizens.
She knows if Alberta independence is voted down, but she at least gave it a voice that she's pro-democracy, and she's going to continue to hopefully be that for Alberta.
And also that's her base, basically.
Canada. Why is that allowed? Why do we have multiple verified reports, even sometimes straight from her mouth, that confirms that she's working with Trump officials down south on how Alberta can separate from Canada? That is literally treason.
And pause it.
That is stuff.
She's never worked with Trump officials to separate Alberta from Canada. She went down there trying to get an oil pipeline deal because the Canadian government is a bunch of green Yahtzees that want to attach all kinds of strings and carbon capture machines, which we don't need. We shouldn't sign that contract. We should start saying no to Mark Carney and the rest of Canada and start building pipelines down to the U.S. who don't want to attach all these strings to the oil.
That the American government would throw you in Guantanamo Bay for and then feed you hummus through the other entrance that is not your mouth. So I just want to know, like, what's the point of us having sedition laws? What's the point of us having the RCMP?
Sorry, I keep pausing them, man. I keep pausing them every 2 seconds. But there's a path for even the United States is a republic, a confederation of states. They can separate. They have a process as well. It's not illegal at all.
If we just allow somebody, an elected official, to actively stir up resentment and division within Alberta, within the province, in addition to all the stuff that she's done with the healthcare system, in addition to all the stuff that she's done with just making sure that the people of Alberta stay ignorant and that they suffer for it. Why are we allowing this? When do we stop? When do we start holding our elected officials accountable for not only the enshittification of the average person's life, but also for trying to start...
That is literally what the Alberta independence movement is doing, holding the officials accountable and saying we're no longer going to be part of this shit show. We're going to leave. We're holding the officials accountable by leaving and taking away all the resources that they still take advantage of and give us nothing for.
Well, you know she's doing something right if the nationalists are coming after her like this.
Up treason? Come on now. We need to respect ourselves.
These people want to live under a king.
Yeah,
that's why Alberta independence should go with the no kings thing. Because clearly he wants a king because he wants the traitors to be called and called out as well and taken away.
Yeah, well, I've been hard on Danielle Smith when I thought she was muddying the ballot or any number of other things, but I did it based upon facts, and I said we got to watch her closely. But a lot of her actions have helped the independence movement, so it's somebody I appreciate when she has helped it, and I've called her out when she's gone against it, and she's going to play a very important role going forward.
And again, she did have a good soundbite this week from Mark Nixon saying, quote, Danielle Smith knows her base. This new NDP is pretty communist. And she is part of the NDP umbrella. How is he going to explain that to his supporters?
And again, I put her in Alberta Personality, and usually we profile content creators. I wanted to profile her today because she's coming back around at least somewhat to Alberta independence, and she has had a rough ride over the last month when she was trying to muddy the question, but she's now hopefully cleared that up.
We're getting a pretty clear idea of what the principles of the federal party are. They're pretty communist. They talk about nationalizing everything, from food to building houses to construction companies. You want everyone to have a heat pump and take an electric or an EV bus to work. So I think it's up to the provincial NDP to talk about how they're going to square the circle. If this is federal policy and they're required to conform with it, what are they going to do to implement it? And they can't hide behind we're a different party because they're not. They share a constitution. We're getting a pretty clear idea.
Yeah, and she's calling out the NDP. I really wish she would call out Mark Carney a lot more, but she's trying to work with them. And man, I just don't see, that's not the future for Alberta. And that's why I'm so hard in the camp of Alberta independence. That being said, she is providing a safety net for Alberta, although I really hope she does not agree to these pipelines with all these strings attached.
Mm-hmm.
She needs to stand up and just go to the Americans and say, we're going to go with a pipeline to them if you want to continue to attach these strings. When you're ready to unattach those strings and actually make money and make Canada prosperous. And she needs to put that message out to the rest of Canada as well, so they understand Canada has everything they need. Alberta has what it needs. If you want a pipeline, there's no strings attached with the pipeline.
Now we'll read some comments and then we'll go to Alberta's Canada. Essentially, what's going on in Canada that Alberta wants to escape from. Troglodyte says, problem with immigrants is that many are subsidized by the federal government. Will they want to leave that cash cow? And that is the thing. And that is why I think the framing should be a bit different. And also trying to help people understand that being subsidized by the federal government is not all that and is not the best idea or chance that you can have as, again, independent person and to make your own decisions. So I think there is a way to frame it also for that population and that type of population, or otherwise kind of be glad to be getting rid of those leeches.
You don't need to frame it for immigrants. They don't have the ability to vote within Alberta. And now if they're full-on citizens no longer get those same benefits that people are on refugee status. So I'm not even trying to appeal to immigrants. Don't soften or lie or do anything else with the arguments. Just be straight up. If you live in Alberta and you're a citizen of Alberta and you used to be an immigrant, but now you're a citizen, it's literally a jackpot lottery ticket if you vote for Alberta independence.
Sorry, I was trying not to sneeze. George says, construction sites and warehouses is where I travel to find work. And now, again, I don't think that even crosses their minds. The youth, I mean, looking for work.
Can we read that again?
The construction sites and warehouses is where I traveled to.
Yeah, the issue now is everything is becoming corporatized and the government wants to start getting into bed with a lot of these corporate businesses.
Macmillan says, Alberta separates and that cash cow goes bye-bye. They'll empty accounts and go home. The immigrants that are getting money from federal subsidies.
And the federal government's going to go to BC and say, start accessing your shit so you can send the remittance payments that Alberta was doing.
Glenn Gunn says, giddy up for calling what it is, bull sugar.
Yeah.
And Primordial 007 says, they're already doing that and maxing out the credit. Plenty of videos with Indians leaving Canada with several $100,000 in cash in their bags.
Yeah, and another thing is Canada's $78 billion in debt. We're going to talk later about this $90 billion tram line or high-speed train line they want to run from Quebec to wherever else. Less than 1% of the population is going to use that thing. Scrap the train, there's your debt. Zero debt. All you got to do is scrap the train. But Quebec and Ottawa understand, they looked at California and a $90 billion train line went up to almost $1 trillion train line, and everybody lined their pockets in the process.
Troglodyte says, not all cultures are the same. It shows when you bring in millions. Again, import the third world, become the third world. Edward says 30 by 30 sounds really scary. And the fact that they're pushing it that hard, that quick, especially now that Alberta independence is a real possibility, at least in their minds. It's been in my mind for a while.
Well, and a lot of people don't know what the 30 and 30 is and the long-term documents and game plan that the UN is trying to pull here. They're trying to get control of the natural resources, not only of Canada. This 30 by 30 game plan is being implemented in other countries by other names. This is the land grab, and this is the natural resource grab. So the natural resources won't go to the citizens of the provinces or the country, but into the globalist pockets, but through tokenization.
Macmillan says, seems better not to have a single leader, a single target. It's easier to take down.
Yeah, and that was true in the beginning of the grassroots organization, but now it's time we need a face, especially because we have somebody like Keith Wilson.
Troglodyte says, years ago, my local McDonald's brought in a ton of Filipinos and got rid of the Canadians, is beginning the workers scam.
Yeah, absolutely. And they have a lot of companies overseas that are, they recruit them in and they send them over to Canada. They're taking a cut as well. It's huge in China, huge in India, huge in the Philippines.
Hello, Tal says, howdy
But
again.
I will say between Chinese, Indian, and Filipino immigrants, I'll take the Filipino immigrants over the other two. That's still to say I would prefer no immigrants.
Tal says, howdy again, Nat and Guy. Hello, thank you for being here. And also says, Troglodyte, exactly the same thing happened here in Red Deer with the immigrants.
Yeah.
Flipping. Joe Rush says, more hypocrisy, calling us Albertans traitors while they make it law punishable if you don't give Canadian jobs to foreigners, not getting jobs based on skill.
Yeah, and again, it didn't just happen where McDonald's cleared out all the regular workers and hired a bunch of immigrants. The federal government subsidized 30% of their wage. So it was just, you're getting 3 workers for the price of 2 at that point.
Talatalk says, I've refused to hire anyone who isn't a Canadian citizen for a couple of decades now. Joe Rush says, I hired based on skill and ability. That's it. And Joe Rush says, yes, Canadian citizen is a must. Everything above board.
Well, my hiring process worked a little different. I hired based upon love.
Technically, I started the channel, so I hired you. I hired a Canadian
With
citizen.
my equipment.
People wouldn't be able to hire me, though, right now, because I'm still not a freaking citizen of that country. I spent 13 years there, not that I really wanted right now, but again, all for nothing. But let's move on to, what is it? Alberta's Canada. So reasons for Alberta to become independent.
I'm angry. I've had enough of these people.
And I say it every time, Alberta is the one propping Canada up as we get into each story with National Canada. This is just another reason for Alberta to leave Canada. And once it does, Canada is going to be high and dry. I really think they're going to start looking to BC and saying, we need those remittance payments.
Yes, they got to get them from somewhere. Hustle BITCH says lockdowns are coming. This time they're using fuel as the trigger.
Oh, and leave it here for a second. The Unacceptable Fringe brought this up as one of the main articles today, so I thought I'd talk about it. I don't necessarily think lockdowns are coming for oil. If they pull this parachute and make lockdowns for oil in Canada, there's nobody in Alberta that's not going to vote for independence. And if they don't vote for independence with this policy coming in, he'll have the ability to do it because he'll have a majority government. But I mean, it's just going to shine a light on Alberta independence like no other. So technically, I would normally be against this, but I'm all for it right now. This will drive millions of people towards Alberta independence. Alberta is full of oil. It's the 3rd largest producer of oil in the world. There's no reason Canada should have a shortage of oil other than their own mismanagement.
Quote, get ready. A man just showed proof on camera and it's setting off alarm bells, not rumors, not guesses, actual contingency plans already being discussed behind the scenes.
Yeah, and this is going to mainstream media within the EU, the UK, and Australia. So those are the globalist countries. It's very likely Mark Carney will implement the same if he gets the majority government.
We already showed a few weeks ago in Australia them telling people not to travel and not to take vacations.
Well, and I think if Carney does try to implement something like this, he'll only do it for the East Coast provinces. Because if he does it for the West Coast, again, Alberta independence is almost a guarantee at that point.
So many people did not believe me when I said we might go into a lockdown due to the situation in Iran, but now I've got proof. Check this out.
Is bringing state and territory leaders together again to finally find an answer to the fuel crisis. Some drastic measures similar to the days of COVID could be on the table as the government braces for a worst-case scenario.
Questions fly about fuel supply.
The anxiety levels are as high as I've seen, maybe with some even higher than COVID.
The further measures they will consider based on the International Energy Agency's plan.
Again, this is an Australia. Australia is energy independent, and they're talking about climate lockdown or energy lockdowns. Canada is also energy independent. So if Australia is willing to do oil lockdowns, I'm sure Canada would do the same. That being said, I don't think it's going to happen because it will push Alberta independence as almost a guarantee.
Encouraging 3 days work from home, 10 kilometres per hour lower speed limits, encouraging public transport and carpooling, and odd and evens number plate days in cities.
We are on the 1 yard line of this whole situation. This is like February of 2020, right before we went into lockdowns in March when the whole COVID disaster happened. You need to be prepared. I would start stocking up on things before things start running out or going up in price.
Okay, and you can leave it there. And one of the big reasons it's suspected that they might do these energy lockdowns is because the EU and the UK are in real dire financial straits, and they're going to want to cover it up with lockdowns, just like they did with the jibby jab era. What is happening in Iran is really affecting the globalists in the EU and the UK specifically.
And they've been in dire straits for quite a while now, not just individual countries, but the EU as a
Yeah,
whole.
but-
And again, they were trying to prop that up with the war in Russia and trying to use that as a channel and as an avenue for salvation. But it's looking more and more harder, more and more nowadays. Go on.
Oh no, that's fine. Before the banking system collapsed within the EU and the UK, they're going to use lockdowns to cover that all up. Okay.
But I think the panicking is not going to help anything.
I'm not worried about it because if Carney frickin' does it, there you go, Alberta independence. I don't have to do I won't have to do a show anymore. Carney's doing my show for me. He's activating every single voter within Alberta to vote for Alberta independence.
But also, this from Sheldon Yakiuch says, food banks are running out of food. This grift has surpassed just being a money grab and is now just cruel to the Canadians already impoverished by the Liberals over the last decade.
Yeah, and I just want to talk about it. We've talked about it in the past, but I wanted to have an article just so everybody can kind of see it.
Do you want me to go into the article?
Well, no, I just want you to talk about it.
Oh, okay. Hold on. Because the article that was there is that, yes, the industrial carbon tax is going up again, but there are reports, and we've shown those as well, that people that used to even donate to food banks are not able to do so anymore. So the infrastructure itself is collapsing because of the mismanagement and because of the rising food prices, including thanks to the carbon tax, but not only because of that, also with the war they're having right now, tariff-wise with the US and not wanting to trade with the one trade partner that makes the most sense.
Well, I also think they want to transition from food banks to government-run grocery stores. We see that transition starting to happen in Toronto. It's more of a socialist, communist thing they can have a much longer lifespan with.
And further control
and gives them,
well.
gives them a lot more control.
But again, we've already seen Cuba, Venezuela, these things fail. Anything managed by the government fails. We're seeing the Canadian healthcare system. Tell me that is well managed and that you're able to get the highest quality healthcare. No, you can't. But Steb says, quote, Ingram saying Canada is following Europe's path to destruction. America has surged past Canada. America is dramatically wealthier than Canadians.
Well, and again, a lot of people don't realize 1 year into this Trump presidency, yeah, I disagree with him for some things, and I hope he doesn't get sucked into this Iran war. That being said, oh God, you took it off.
Sorry.
Okay, you can continue.
Well, because you were talking,
it messed my train of thought up there for a minute. What I was going to say was the United States economy is outpacing China for the first time in decades when it comes to GDP. A lot of people don't know that. They pitch America as like the economy is failing. No, it's reindustrializing. The dollar is coming down because that's good when you're a manufacturing economy. A lot of people don't understand. A lot of the nuts and bolts are being reworked in the United States, and they're outpacing China right now for the first time in decades.
But also with the bad planning and the bad mismanagement and the big mismanagement, I can't talk.
You're losing your words there.
Mark Nixon says, quote, Canada, we have a major problem. No, shit. Quote, why do we need to invest $3.8 billion for nature and also require private investments? Carbon pricing system has been rolled out right before our eyes.
And again, this is the 30 by 30 scam where they're going to control all natural resources in Canada and tokenize it. This has nothing to do with a $3.8 million investment. And people are focusing on that. Like, we don't need to invest that. A lot of that money Carney is actually getting from private industries to put that money up because those are going to be the beneficiaries once he gets control of the natural resources through tokenization. So don't be fooled by this is some way to put $3.8 billion into the system and line their pockets or something. This is a much bigger play for all Canada's natural resources and land rights.
Part of this announcement today, $3.8 billion, as you say, new national parks, marine conservation sites, more. But you said you cannot do it with public money alone. This is a question of catalyzing private investments. Just how much of this plan to conserve almost 30% of Canada does the private sector need to pay for?
So, when we look at, for example, just this summer, I was in Northwest Territories where we announced a project for permanence that protects 30% of the Northwest Territories. It's about 2% of Canada's landmass. It was done in partnership with 21 Indigenous nations. That was something that is through the PFP process. It's public dollars, but it's also with matching from philanthropic dollars that add to it and help us to be able to move forward with that kind of project. So there's a long history of actually using public funds to help catalyze private or philanthropic investments.
We had a super chat, so we'll read the super chat and then we'll come back to the video. But again, I just want to emphasize, this is not about protecting lands. This is about controlling all natural resources in all Canada. Alberta won't be able to control its natural resources. Its people will not benefit from it once this 30 by 30 plan goes through.
Thank you so much to Steve Zafaro.
Oh, thank you again.
$9 super chat, $9.99 super chat saying, no, Guy, you're stuck with us forever doing the show and listening to Nat, the voice of reason. Thank you so much.
I don't mind it. And I'll continue to do the show, even though Carney seems to be helping me every single day by these crazy policies.
And then continue saying, correct on the Convention of States, Article 25 will be rolled out when Democrats next take over.
Yeah, and that's what I was talking to you about. I rarely bring it up on the show because I don't want to see states separating from the union because they are the world superpower and they really can, if they fall apart, Western culture is going to really fall apart at its core and you will see the rise of China. So although I want to see Alberta separate, it's because Canada doesn't hold the same place in the world the United States does. There are huge separatist movements in the States I just don't talk about. The big one is Texas. It has 34% rate of wanting to separate, and it's a quiet sleeping giant, and it's always had that separatist string amongst Texans. But
thank you so much. Sorry, I was trying to figure out if some comments had been
skipped. And thank you to Steve for also liking a lot of our posts on X. It really does help.
Yes.
And X is our companion to the show, so everybody knows a lot of the stories we just don't have time to get to or time runs out. So if we miss some stories, they're always posted on our X.
Yes. But continuing on with the insanity.
And so that's just to say that project alone adds 2% as we go to our 30 by 30 targets, which is what we're committed to doing.
Obviously, and so I'd love to just better understand based on what you said there, like I would put philanthropic in a different bucket than private industry. To what extent do you see the balance here? I mean, this is a time of uncertainty for a lot of private industry. Is this primarily, to your mind, coming from philanthropic? Or are you expecting it to?
Philanthropic is going to invest billions of dollars. No, these are NGOs, other governments trying to get control of Canada's natural resources, and they're trying to call it philanthropic. This is like when the Russian and Chinese government do lobbying within Canada to restrict access to your own natural resources because it benefits them. They're trying to take control of your natural resource sector, not only through the UN, but also First Nations. The entire scheme works as they can tokenize things, and then China's going to come in and buy all the access, just like they've bought all of Canada's mining companies at this point.
Industry to step up as well.
Well, that gets me to talk a bit about the third pillar, which is there is actually an expert task force that's being put together specifically to actually look at how do we value nature, but also how do we mobilize capital for nature. And so that's part of actually what this nature plan is going to be looking at is how do we better mobilize capital that isn't public dollars? And at the same time, like what's that mix, those kinds of questions that you're raising. So
she literally just said it there. They're looking into how to mobilize capital for nature and use that as an avenue.
First, the government is going to capture access to all these natural resources by this 30 and 30, then expand that. And oh God, I don't want to explain the whole program. It's like, I've been researching this for over a year. This is a natural resource grab so they can sell off all the natural resources to China. This is why Canada is becoming such a threat to the United States. And a lot of people think the 51st state is becoming more and more relevant because Canada is becoming more and more of a threat, and Alberta needs to separate because I truly think Canada should become the 51st state at this point because they're aligning so heavily with China.
More to talk about on that. But, philanthropic dollars and even private dollars have helped with many of the projects that we announced. I mentioned the PFP for Northwest Territories, but also I was in British Columbia in December where we announced protection for an area in the Kootenays. It's a grizzly bear habitat. That also was in partnership with Indigenous peoples, the government of British Columbia, the federal government, and private industry. Because The real thing to think about is that the federal government, like federal lands are only 6% of the lands across Canada. I think 76% is provincial. Like, we need to work in partnership with provinces and territories, with Indigenous peoples, with private ownership, if we're going to get to 30 by 30 targets, because frankly, federal government lands don't even account for 30%
Okay,
of
stop
our
it there. We
country.
don't need to get to 30 by 30 targets. We need to get 0 by 0 targets. Provinces should own the land. So if they access the natural resources, it should go to the people. And all these remittance payments is going back to the federal government. It needs to stop. The only way to do it is Alberta independence. This First Nations play for a lot of this land. It was laid out. Once they take control of the land, they can then sell off the natural resources to China outside of anything the federal government can do.
So again, the federal government...
it gives them deniability.
So the federal government wants to take a hold of everything. Essentially, the food banks are running out of food, and Alberta wants to become independent, and the young people have no hope and are looking to move anywhere that is not in Canada. And yet, they have now decided to also remove God from the national anthem.
Well, and they've been doing this for a while, but they're talking about wanting to do this officially.
Yeah.
First, it was just a random person here, a random person there, adding or taking out words. Now it's the government. They want to take God out of this. It's the same thing in schools. Okay, yeah, I understand you don't want God in schools, but you want to insert all kinds of other ideologies, and you're upset when Alberta pushes back on those other ideologies.
Again, why do they want to remove God from the national anthem? Not that Albertans really care, because they're going to be independent and make their own anthem soon, but because they want to be the gods. They want to be the ones that put the ideology onto everybody, and they are the ones who have almost self-appointed themselves gods.
Yeah.
That is why.
Let's go into the next story because it's related. If I put them back to back.
You did.
Good.
Riley Donovan says, quote, Alberta is mandating that O Canada be sung in schools every week with Bill 25.
Yeah, I think it's too late to push this to insert national pride within Canada and Albertans. Alberta independence is the way. This is going to be a good policy when it's the Alberta national anthem, when Alberta separates. So, yeah. But that being said, you're already taking God out of it, and now you want to press it on kids. Go figure.
And make it gender neutral as well.
But because I grew up half in Canada, half in the United States, and I used to have to sing the pledge of allegiance to the flag. And then when I moved back to Canada, I'm like, oh, why don't they do that?
Here in Mexico, we have to do, well, because I went to school here in Mexico, we do honors to the flag. So we actually march around. Like I used to be, I got to help the flag when you get good grades. But everybody in the school like lines up outside, and they line in their own classes, and then they parade around the flag as you sing the national anthem. It was every Monday, I think, but there's some schools that do it every day.
Yeah, it brings a lot of national unity and a unifying identity to the nation, and you really do need that. Mexicans are a very proud people, and that's one of the big reasons for it.
Not always good.
America used to be as well. You don't have to pledge allegiance to the flag. A lot of schools no longer do that, and it should be something that's brought back.
Paul Mitchell says, quote, Ottawa wants to spend $90 billion on a high-speed rail between Toronto and Quebec City. That's $4,000 out of the pocket of every Canadian taxpayer to fund something that 99% of them will never use. As usual, Western Canadians will be paying to subsidize Ontario and Quebec.
Okay, well, I don't care about all the statistics here. I was recently looking again at the national deficit, $78 billion. You got $90 billion right there. That's the only reason you need, not for this line. Less than 1% of Canadians will actually use this high-speed line. It's going to come out to a lot more than $90 billion, and it's going to be used for politicians to line their pocket, just like Gavin Newsom did within California. If you want to get rid of your deficit, all you have to do is get rid of all the money earmarked for that particular line.
And we just had that example with California, and where how the spending increased more and more and the cost increased more and more, how it's still not done yet, and how so many others line their pockets with these kinds of projects.
Well, Canada has a small national debt relative. I mean, if you get rid of one train, you get rid of your national debt. Absolutely fantastic. I don't know why nobody's telling Carney this, in the House of Commons.
Oh, I'm sure they're
let's pay down the national debt and get rid of...
Because that doesn't benefit the people that it's going to benefit.
Let's get rid of your little toy train project.
Because that doesn't benefit the people that are actually going to benefit from this. Not the citizens, and not even people in Toronto or Quebec. Eric Thorvaldson says, quote, Alberta is lucky we won't be part of Canada soon. Bad things are coming. Antonio tweet says, no, as the Bank of Canada warns, the next 5 years could be turbulent. The current 5 years have been turbulent already.
And we all know the Bank of Canada put this out. This statement came out a little while ago. If the Bank of Canada is putting it like this, we're really in dire straits because they're going to always try to play it down. It's time to get out now. And if you need any more of a push to vote for independence, the Canadian bank telling you times are going to be turbulent, meaning there's going to be a full-on collapse or recession.
Not just that, but the RCMP that I don't even like that much, saying that if Canadians realized how bad things actually are, they would start a revolution. I guess Alberta started first.
Well, and the independence movement is that revolution. It's that revolution towards freedom and away from communism. And that's what this vote is really going to entail. And a lot of people don't realize that now. But if Alberta independence doesn't go the way that I hope, you're going to see all of Canada is going to be a communist state within 10 years. And then people are going to be wishing they would have listened to me.
I'm still the voice of reason, though.
But you still don't listen to me, so I don't know how effective I am on the show. But
but now I'll go read some of your comments, if not most of them, and then we'll go into Alberta and the world, talking about some of the declarations from Trump, what's going on in the U.S., but also what's going on elsewhere that it impacts Alberta.
Yeah. We'll do a couple stories there because
way.
we have to have a hard out at 7.
Yes. Dara Robinson says, take your children out of the public school indoctrination system, consider charter or separate. They don't charge fees or homeschool. Remember, the funding follows the student. And I'm always very pro homeschooling.
Yeah, but it also sounds like he probably lives in the United States where you have that option. They're quickly taking that option away. When we used to do a lot more geopolitics, it was like every other week a nation was either taking it away, no homeschooling, or they were putting up legislation to take it out. They don't want people homeschooling anymore.
Yeah. Why? Because they want to take a hold of the parental rights and anything that the newest, youngest citizens will think and do.
Yeah.
Troglodyte says, we homeschooled 3. The teachers punished us by loading our kids with tons of extra work. No way the kids in class were doing even half of it.
Yeah.
Because they don't like it. Again, the unions, they want to control everything.
Well, and the big reason I like homeschooling is not that you're getting a better standard of education, which you most of the time are, but it takes out the ideology.
That too. And the control, again, that the governments have over the children. Primorus007 says, Nat, you're skipping some of my comments. LOL, too risky for you to read. But then I try to go up and see what other comments you had left. And I think maybe YouTube is the one that took them away because I can't see them.
No, because we haven't said it in a while. If you do leave emojis within your comments, they get blocked. We had to do that because we used to have so much spam coming in, and everybody that had spam was all caps and emojis. We let caps go, but emojis, we don't get the amount of spam we used to have anymore, which is good. So it's been working. But if you leave emojis, just leave them out of your comments so we can see them.
Yes. But if YouTube keeps censoring you can always go to RUMBLE. We are streaming. We're always streaming dually, so YouTube and Rumble. You can leave comments on Rumble.
Yeah, we don't censor.
Yes.
Unless we're 100% sure you're a bot.
Yeah. Yes. Also, if you post any links, those are blocked too because of spam, because we don't want people clicking on weird things. Macmillan GB says, quote, when we separate and get rid of income tax, that frees up women to not have to work. From what I hear, most would rather raise the kids. They'd be able to afford it. And again, even the ones that say, no, I don't want to have kids, I don't want to raise them. That's actually what your biological system wants you to do.
Yeah, and there needs to be some kind of incentive program once you have 3 or more kids. If there is a tax system, then no tax. But if you already don't have a tax system, you have to figure out a way to incentivize, like Hungary did in a lot of Eastern European countries. The way they did it is they said no tax if you have 3 or more kids, which has been working for a lot of countries around the world.
Joe says, I know my daughter would love to stay home with the 5 kids. Well, good for your daughter. Oh, yeah, I remember Joe told us that he has like a bunch of grandkids. But unfortunately, can't afford it. Both daughter and son-in-law have good paying jobs. That's how nuts it is. And then says, should have said careers. They've both been in them for well over a decade. Yeah. And that's the insanity of the system itself and the fact that it's not going to get fixed.
Yeah, and we have another story about a major land grab within Canada, and they're trying to take rights of what you can and can't do on your property away. They want to make sure you can't grow food on your property. We're going to be going into that story tomorrow, but even if you own property, I mean, one way to cut off or cut down a lot of cost of living is food costs if you grow it on a homestead and you have animals on your homestead. They want to get rid of food and animals on homesteads.
Troglodyte says, leaving isn't treason. What Carney is doing is. This
Absolutely.
guy is very low IQ. The guy that was saying Danielle Smith is treasonous. Yeah. Macmillan says, it isn't sedition or treason. People need to learn words. That too. Again, it shows the lack of education that is currently happening in Canada.
Yeah, and again, I called out Danielle Smith when she was doing things I didn't like muddying the waters. But when she does things that help Alberta independence, we need to praise her and reward her for it so she keeps helping it and steps up in those very crucial times. If we just keep ragging on her and saying she's not doing a good job because she did this or that, she's really trying to fix the mistake she did with muddying that ballot, and I do appreciate it. I appreciate she lowered the standard for the signatures as well. So if she does something I don't like, I'm going to call her out. But right now, she seems to be trending in the right direction.
Troglodyte says, gee, what has Quebec been doing for decades, moron?
Yeah.
And then Primorous 007 says, this guy's a moron. We don't allow her. She was voted in by the people to do what she needs to do, what needs to be done. Don't like it, too bad.
Well, I want to say one other thing, and that is if they do these energy lockdowns, it's going to be very interesting what Quebec does, because Quebec has a ton of energy they choose not to access because that would cut off their remittance payments. Yeah, so I mean, Carney, that would be an easy fix is that he needs to tell Quebec, you need to access your natural resources, and they're going to say no. And that's going to really access the independence movement within Quebec, which has now been delayed to 2030 when they originally said it was going to happen by the end of the year. So if he does anything with these energy lockdowns, it's going to, number one, really help out Alberta independence, but activate the Quebec independence movement as well.
Walker, hello Walker,
Oh, good to
says
see you.
Alberta must appeal to the self-determination of peoples that the left often mentions. Exactly. Macmillan says prime contractor on the train used to be SNC-Lavalin.
Well, and one other thing, and I meant to talk about this today, was the NDP voters. Yeah, I know a lot of them look like woke rejects that we can't appeal to for Alberta independence, but a lot of them have socialist ideals and ideas. And Alberta will succeed a lot more, not to bring socialism, but to have universal healthcare that actually works. And a lot of things they actually want, even though they disagree with natural resources, they'll like the outcome of universal healthcare, number one. But there's a lot of older NDP voters that considered the NDP working class and they just continue to vote. So appeal to any boomer NDP voters for Alberta independence. I think they can be brought over. There are a lot of people disregard them automatically, like they won't vote for independence. I think they can and they will if the right arguments are made.
Kempeli, hello, says Kempent sorry, says Carney is going to seize the farmland that is on the train route. Basically. Probably.
Well, he's trying to seize all farmland in Canada. We're going to get a little bit more into that, and he wants to make sure you can't farm on your own property in the future.
And now let's run over to Alberta and the world.
Let's just do one story there.
Okay.
Because we're running
out
out
of
of
time. I'll finish
time.
reading your comments, and then we'll go over to RU and Bailey. Well, we can do all the stories.
Okay, there's 3 stories related, so we'll have to do all 3 stories. It's about Trump and what's going on there. That affects Alberta independence in a big way. It also affects the EU and the UK right now.
Yes. So from Colin Rugg, quote, President Trump says the U.S. will be hitting
No,
Iran.
you don't have to play the clip. We'll just read what it kind of says here.
Okay. Quote, President Trump says the U.S. will be hitting Iran, quote unquote, extremely hard over the next 2 to 3 weeks, says they will be sent back to the Stone Age where they belong.
And if anybody watched the show yesterday, I kind of called that. I said he's going to ask for another 2 to 3 weeks. I actually watched it back today. And I said, oh, bang on. Yeah, eventually he's going to want to hit it for another 2 to 3 weeks. I really hope he doesn't get sucked into this thing because that's the transitional point we're in right now. But he also said in the speech, which was very crucial, we don't need the oil from here. We're going to leave. We're going to finish the bombing for 2 to 3 weeks, and then we can hand it over to the EU and the UK. They're the ones that actually access and need all this oil. If they don't come in and secure it, China's going to come in, and China's not going to give them that oil. So it's going to be very interesting, and that's going to divide. They don't have big militaries in the UK or the EU, so having to secure the Strait of Hormuz really makes it so they can't escalate the war in the Ukraine anymore.
Quote, I can say tonight that we are on track to complete all of America's military objectives. We're going to hit them extremely hard over the next 2 to 3 weeks. We're going to bring them back to the Stone Ages where they belong.
Yeah, and I don't like overall the fact that he's over there. I'm willing to give him some breathing room and see what happens, but I really hope he doesn't get sucked in. And if he does and puts a bunch of boots on the ground, I'm not going to support that. And that being said, I do like Trump a lot, so I do give him some breathing room and see how things work out once the operation's done here.
And Peter Saying Ong says, quote, I don't want to dream too big yet, but there's some chance this war could both break NATO and force Europe and China to police their own interests instead of making America spend $100 billion a year doing it.
Yeah, and this is the big thing you see really happening right now. It's giving Trump an exit plan from NATO and a justification not only to the American people, but the people of the world. He backed them up on their plan in Ukraine, even though he didn't want to. He asked for their help, even though he didn't really need it. I think this was always the play. He wants to pull out of NATO. Rubio gave a statement on this, so I really do hope they end up pulling the trigger on NATO. If they do, and they do pull out of NATO, it was worth the 2-month war or whatever they're having.
Do you want me to read it?
No, you can leave it there. Let's go into Rubio's statement, though. Just because we're running out of time, I'm pushing through these last few stories.
Sadie says, quote, Secretary of State Marco Rubio just dropped a truth bomb, and we'll just listen to it.
And I've been a big supporter of NATO. And one of the reasons why I've been a supporter of NATO is because I believe that these basing rights give us leverage and give us flexibility and operational capability all over the world. But if NATO is just about us defending Europe if they're attacked, but them denying us basing rights when we need them, that's not a very good arrangement. That's a hard one to stay engaged in and say this is good for the United States. So all of that's going to have to be reexamined. All of it's going to have to be reexamined. And I've been a big supporter of NATO.
They did not only not go to help secure the Strait of Hormuz, they also didn't allow the U.S. to use their military bases. Multiple military bases were requested, so now they have the reason to pull out of NATO. And a lot of our viewers last night said he would do it last night, but he really can't because he'll need a vote from Congress. That being said, he's setting up the work that needs to be done, and I really do hope he pulls out at the end of that 3 weeks and leaves it in the hands of the EU and the UK, because that's going to absolutely be devastating for them. They always expect the U.S. to secure the world's oceans. They're the ones that need that oil. They should be the ones securing it.
But also, and just lastly, Canada, and again, Alberta, pay attention, as Relevant says, quote, nearly half of that trade is Canada buying Saudi oil because the Liberals have blocked pipelines that would bring in oil from Alberta. Why do the Liberals prefer conflict oil from OPEC over ethical oil from Alberta? And they're very happy. Foreign Policy Canada says Canada and the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia share over 50 years of strong ties, including $4 billion in bilateral trade.
Go Canada.
Yeah.
Like you have Alberta right there, third biggest producer of oil, yet you're unwilling to do it. And if once again, if they somehow try to make these energy lockdowns, I can't wait for Albertans to wake up.
Mm-hmm. Okay, now we finish reading your comments and we'll go over to RUMBLE quite quick. Troglodyte says, for me, a problem with the new Canadians is they have not gone through the process of building this country and many won't ever assimilate. When Don Cherry said, you people, he was pointing this out.
Yeah, there's no unifying identity for them to assimilate into. This is the Canadian government that built this mess, and that's why it can't be fixed, and they're continuing it. They want to have the Canadian population reach 100 billion by 2050. Are you out of your freaking mind? It's time for Alberta to separate and show the world how it's done.
But I also think there's a very important distinction between settlers who built Canada, for example, versus immigrants who take from Canada.
Well, and we played that video the other day, the difference between immigrants and settlers, and it was very interesting.
Macmillan says, I miss Don Cherry. And also says, immigrants are also posting how to get free food while making well over $100,000 a year.
Yeah, there's a huge education process, not just online, but over in India to tell them exactly what to do when they get here.
Mm-hmm. Threadfast Hello says, you have to be a resident of Alberta on Independence Day if you want to live here. Otherwise, apply for a visa. And I do agree with that. Even as someone that supports it, but probably won't be there at that time. Sam says, Threadfast, what have you been talking about? WTF is Independence Day in Canada. Sam, I've noticed, has been not the happiest about Alberta independence. Sam says, either you're eligible to vote or not.
Yeah.
Steve Zafaro says, because it's not separating, it's moving Congress back to the states, back to the whole.
And one of the things is you're either eligible to vote or not. But I'm going to say I've been a big proponent of recruiting other people from other provinces that are conservative minded, that have lost hope in Canada, to relocate to Alberta to vote. And why? Because there's a good chance Mark Carney's going to have some slick trick to relocate people from other provinces to Alberta to vote for nationalism.
But again, Sam says, WTF, Steve Surfaro does not separating moving Congress back to the states mean, holy crap, he's talking about the U.S. Because we were talking, Steve Surfaro was talking about the U.S. because we were talking about several U.S. states also wanting to separate and then being within a republic, and how the states also in the U.S. have that ability, democratic process, to separate if they wanted to.
Yeah, there is a process.
So that's
there
what
as
Steve
well.
Surfaro was mentioning, nothing to do with Canada or Alberta.
Yeah, it's a lot different when it comes to the U.S. because, again, they set the culture for the world. They set a lot of things for the world, and I don't want to slide down the path of China becoming the world power and we having to adopt their ideals. This is one of the big reasons why I'm very pro-independence, not for the United States, even though I've lived in a lot of the states that I don't like California and New York. That being said, in order to be the world power, you need to stay together. Otherwise, the whole world is going to descend into darkness.
McMillan says, no, Alberta needs to be and stay completely independent. Agree.
Yep.
Rage Against the Machine says, time to go. Yes. Troglodyte says, we used to say the Lord's Prayer every morning. Long time ago. Sam says, so what's the plan if the referendum fails? I signed the petition and will vote yes, but it's important to be realistic and plan for what is likely failure.
Yeah, the backup.
I don't think it'll be failure, but...
Well, the backup plan, depending how he throws a monkey wrench in it, meaning if he uses the Emergencies Act, there's other chess moves we can make. But if it's completely shut down and the vote somehow fails, and it fails by a significant margin, which I don't think it will do, but if it does, the United States and Mexico are the backup plan for a lot of people. Canada's going to descend into darkness real quick once Mark Carney gets that majority government. So much so, there's a lot of questions. Is this Alberta independence vote even going to make it to October 19th, or is he going to implement the Emergencies Act? So I think when I appeal to other people from other provinces to move to Alberta, to vote for Alberta independence, I'm saying these are people that have already saved money wanting to cash out and move to the United States. Give Alberta a shot for independence first, and then Mexico and the U.S. can be the backup plan.
Rage Against the Machine says, stop paying taxes. Should have happened a long time ago. Sam says, born in Medicine Hat and now a proud Calgarian, never grew up saying the Lord's Prayer every morning. We grew up working our asses off. But that is an important cultural or faith thing that used to happen that no longer happens.
Yeah. Albertans wake up and say, I hope the government stays out of my way, while people in Ottawa wake up in the morning and say, what is the government going to give me?
And I'm glad Rafa and Walker found themselves here in the chat because they're saying hi to each other. They're subscribers from the Spanish channel too.
They're our oldest and most loyal subscribers.
Yes. Forshank says, we are full. Alberta is full. In many ways. Threadfast says, Alberta independence all the way, prosperity and hope, and are luring Albertans to the liberation side. We can declare independence as early as January 2027.
Yeah.
And Edward says, the most Albertan man in the world was good friends with Chuck Norris. He gave Chuck pointers on his roundhouse. Probably. But now we're moving over to RUMBLE. Thank you so much for all your comments, and especially for all your super chats from Steve. Hold on.
Sapporo.
No, I know, but I was trying to find the other two. Steve, who else super chatted? JP Alberta and Steve again. So thank you so much to all of you for the super chats. We will see you over at RUMBLE in about 30 seconds. Thank you so much for being here. Again, we do have another show tomorrow, 5 p.m. to 7 p.m. every day. What? Anything else?
No.
Oh, okay.
Oh, we're still on.
Yes.
I was logging into Rumble to get ready.
Have a good night, everyone. Cheers, and remember to hit the like. Yes, and please subscribe before you go over to RUMBLE. And again, the show continues over there. It's not over.
Just a couple stories.
Yes.
Let's get ready to